Hey everyone, my name is Rich, and this is Rich Talks Records, episode 33, and this is, it's the big one, it's finally happening. We're going to be talking about Public Image Limited in 1979, so settle in, get your popcorn, get comfortable, it's going to be a long one, so just warning you now. And at the end of this video, well, we will be announcing the winner of the 100 subscriber special, so you're either going to have to wait patiently for that, or just skip all the way the hell to the end. So the Pill 1978 video, I think, has now become my biggest video. It has usurped the OG on this channel, the Lou Reed video. So pretty amazing, and we've picked up some even more subscribers, so welcome, and pretty cool. So hopefully, I have put a hell of a lot of work into this damn thing, and notes and listening, and and I'm going to be getting into the labyrinth of various releases and things from this time. So it's been a lot to read, a lot to watch, a lot to listen to, and kind of like the last video, I'm going to be doing my damnedest to cover everything. I think the only thing I'm not going to specifically talk about are individual print interviews, though I will be posting links to everything. The other thing I will say from the start, just like the 1978 video and the 1985 and 86 video before that, all credit to fodderstomp.com. They did exceptional work, and this video truly would not be possible without their Herculean efforts. So I am again consulting their chronology. They're the ones who cataloged all this stuff. They're the ones who transposed all of it. The photos that I'll be using are all off of their site, so all credit due, like, you know what I mean? So, that again, kind of like the last video, that like needs, I think, to be emphatically stated from the jump off. So and I haven't been angrily contacted by anybody saying, "Hey, you jerk, how dare you?" So I think it's okay. I post the links to these videos on a few pages on social media, and I haven't gotten any resistance yet. So so anyway, I guess we are going to kind of use the same chronology of layout of the last video. You'll notice that the chronology sort of broke down a little bit in the last video. This one will probably break down as well as I get into talking more about the music. So I'm kind of thinking it might sort of shake out as chronology, and then chronology talk, context talk, and then kind of music talk. So I think that's how it's all gonna play out. Is when Jim Walker, original Public Image Limited drummer Jim Walker, leaves Public Image Limited and moves to Israel. So Jim Walker, has claimed that there was, that there was financial mismanagement, and that everything was slanted toward Lydon, and that was when he became disillusioned. And then he didn't like the first album, of course, and then he didn't like the kind of, idleness of some of the band members. So he decided to fuck off. What is interesting out of all of that is, first of all, to the best I could see of everything, he's on the publishing for everything. And Lydon has kind of always been, and I talked about this in the 85-86 video with Jeb and Bruni and the other cat who isn't Brett Helm, whose name is now escaping me, that Lydon would cut people into publishing. So I'm not really sure kind of what he's talking about in that sense. The other thing is Pill, the idea of Pill being a company. Jim Walker was one of the four partners 1/4 ownership. So there, which if that is true, that he did have in fact 1/4 ownership, it does raise the question of what about Jeanette Lee and Dave Crow? Did they have any ownership? It does bring that into question. But apparently Walker would not give up his quarter, and that did not get worked out until several years. And so I'm off of the Fodder Stomp chronology. Lydon left in a flurry of solicitors' letters. So Pill is down a drummer now. In my Black Flag video, I chronicled the never-ending set of drummers that they had. Some truly exceptional, some but most exceptional. Most of them were exceptional. So Pill went through the number of drummers in 1 year that Black Flag went through in the entirety of their existence. It is truly Spinal Tap-esque that they just couldn't keep a goddamn drummer. So the first person in is the very mysterious Vivian Jackson, also possibly known as Vivian Weathers. There are no photos of him from Pill. There are vague memories of a reggae drummer hanging around at Gunter Grove. That's about all that anyone has. So Vivian Jackson was brought in. The Public Image Limited had a concert in Dublin scheduled that they wound up canceling. And and so Keith Levine has no memory of him. Lydon just remembers that he was, hard to deal with, which is saying something in a group of seriously combustible personalities. And apparently he is not the same Vivian Jackson who is the reggae producer. There apparently are fleeting press references to Vivian Jackson or Vivian Weathers, whoever he may be, that he might have played with Linton Kwesi Johnson, Pill favorite, and in this period frequent opening act. But nobody really knows. It's hard to confirm these things. So he, all these decades later, remains a man of mystery. So drummer number one, Vivian Jackson, aka Vivian Weathers. We hardly knew ye. Pill has now gone through two drummers in the space of like a month and a half. So I don't want to get too bogged down in the comings and goings and details of all of this stuff, but because, again, at some point down the line, and it might be years from now, but I will do a post-breakup Sex Pistols breakup video, and I will talk about the Great Rock and Roll Swindle and that whole weird era. But it is worth mentioning because I think it kind of like in the last video, it informs a lot of things happening here. The Lydon v. Glitterbest lawsuit is working its way through the courts, and it is in February that Steve and Paul jump sides over to John when they realize that Malcolm has truly been misappropriating their earnings, especially for the purposes of making this bizarre vanity film, mockumentary, or vanity project stroke mockumentary, The Great Rock and Roll Swindle. So apparently the figure that was being debated about was the £90,000 that McLaren had funneled away from Sex Pistols royalties to pay for the film. The case doesn't actually get settled fully until 1984, and then even then, I think it was still another couple years after that things finally really got settled. So that happens at the beginning of February. I mentioned the Dublin gig. They would have played the show in February in Dublin with the mysterious Vivian Jackson, aka Vivian Weathers, but that got canceled because Lydon was needed in court. And in the middle of all of this, on February the 16th, Sid Vicious dies. So the saga of Sid and Nancy, which was in October 78, Sid died, I forget what it was, like a day or two after he had gotten out of jail, and there's much intrigue around his death. Lydon has his theories as to what happened, but it is a whole kind of sordid affair. In the public image is rotten documentary. Don Letts talks about how there really was a pall over Pill at this time, and how dark the atmosphere at Gunter Grove was. Lydon's mother had died the previous year, and he was extremely close with her. And and Keith had gone back with Sid, so they had a relationship. And as far as Wobble goes, Sid was, as I talked about in the last video as well, Sid was one of the Johns. So they all had relationships and ties with Sid. Again, his death and the bizarre tabloid thing that came with it, I think caused a lot of upset in Pill world. I will say about the Dublin gig, though, it would have been remarkable if it had happened, because it was to have been a 24-hour festival, kind of like the Technicolor Dream Festival in London in '67 that Syd Barrett-led Pink Floyd played, and that you see footage of John Lennon at, and who's Robert Fraser and kind of all those kind of like the London Underground people. But this would have had Throbbing Gristle on the bill. So can you imagine a bill that would have had Public Image Limited and Throbbing Gristle? That would have been pretty interesting and pretty cool to have that meeting of the minds. It would have been fascinating to see. I just have a feeling Wobble wouldn't have gotten on with them, but it would have been interesting. And Lydon, who knows what Lydon would have thought of them. I could see Keith Levine getting into very long discussions with Genesis and Cozy and and Sleazy et al. So that would have been pretty amazing. On February 23rd, just nearly 2 weeks after the death of Sid Vicious, the Public Image Limited plays a concert in Manchester at King's Hall, Bellevue, and the drummer was one Eddie Edwards, brought in specifically for the gig. The reason why Eddie Edwards was drafted is because Pill, at that point, were using rehearsal rooms that were run by the band that he was in, the Vibrators. And the Vibrators were a great, now I feel kind of underrated. So this is drummer number 3. Is Eddie Edwards. So the Vibrators, I think, were a really underrated early punk band. There were debates as to the validity of their punk credentials, etc. But, in a lot of ways, I'm not terribly interested in that sort of thing. I never have been. There are a lot of old school people who do swear by the Vibrators. I remember they were one of the only, in the 1992 Rolling Stone album guide, they were one of the only bands, one of the only punk bands that actually got a nice, a favorable write-up. And I always thought they're fantastic. They're a really, really good band. I always thought maybe the fact that they were good musicians and that they were more sort of overtly rock and roll. I always thought maybe it might have, in some people's minds, diminished some of their punkness. But, you know, again, that's kind of nonsense, dumbass stuff as far as I'm concerned. I think they were a really great band, and there's some really great footage of them out there on the YouTubes. So Eddie Edwards is drafted for the show. And, you know, again, John had a very good history with Manchester with the Sex Pistols, so they go up there again. Really, really cool bill, kind of like the Rainbow gigs over Christmas. So it was the bill was called the Creation for Liberation and was a benefit to aid the Race Today Friendly Society. And on the bill, this is a really good bill, we have the pop group, one of my favorites, a Rich Talks Records favorite, and home of then drummer Bruce Smith, future of the Slits, and future of Public Image Limited itself. But that would be like about a decade away. But Merger, who's apparently a reggae band. I don't know anything about Merger. As I said in the last video, I'm not exactly Albert Reggae, so I'm not the person to speak on that. But also we have two poets. We have Linton Kwesi Johnson back again, and renowned punk poet John Cooper Clarke. So really, really cool bill. And how did it go? This one-off gig with Eddie Edwards. Well, first of all, I think it's after maybe the second or is it after the first or second song? I don't remember. Lydon says, "There's is this the one he says it at? Yeah, no gimmicks, no theater, just us." And I should talk about that for a second too. Pill got slated by certain critics and certain portions of the public at the time at this time for the loose, open-ended nature of their concerts. They did three or four shows this year in 1979, and I want to say at nearly every single one of them, Lydon refers to it as a rehearsal, which begs the question, what is it that they were rehearsing for? And then, of course, the fact that in the cavalcade of drummers, they all, at one point or another, complain that Pill never rehearsed. So what Lydon puts it down to is honesty, and later in the next year in the Tom Snyder interview, he talks about his refusal to condescend to audiences. That was weirdly perceived as arrogance by some people. And I will get into that maybe as I get into a couple of the other later shows. But it's interesting, their perspective on it, that anti-slick and presenting it as is, and sort of straight off the street, as it were, that was perceived as a form of arrogance, and just the gulf in perception around this. Apparently, Pill just had one night of rehearsals with Eddie Edwards, and the show is up on YouTube. It sounds excellent. I for some reason always thought that that this show hadn't been recorded, and I was very pleased to discover it in my putting together everything to do this video. The show is fucking awesome. It's fucking incredible, especially with the fact that, you know, Lydon notes that it's basically a rehearsal. They are absolutely fucking explosive. And Eddie Edwards, being a great rock and roll drummer, supercharges them and ups the tempos to fantastic effect. So they're still very much, because I mean they're only like 2 months out from the Rainbow shows. They're very much kind of just playing a version of the 1978 set. One of the first things that jumps out is the difference in Keith Levine's guitar playing. He has already moved away from the falling clusters of notes and the stabbing shards. So when they open with theme, it's a lot more single note runs, and it's more tightly wound, and to amazing effect. He finds whole new areas to explore, and the version of theme is absolutely mind-boggling. But then they do two versions of Annalisa. The Annalisa is the second song played, and then the last song played. The last, oh my god, like they are basically playing at like Don Bolus Germs tempos. Amazing, like Eddie Edwards just juices them like spectacularly. So they do Low Life. They do an amazing version of Religion. Keith leans in even harder on the kind of the sort of dark spy film noir aspects of the guitar parts. Attack is phenomenal. Then they do two versions of Belson Was a Gas. So this is just 2 weeks after the death of Sid. The Great Rock and Roll Swindle had not been unleashed yet on the world. But what is interesting about this song, and this very curious song, and the fact that Pill was playing it, is Lydon basically says, this is intended, or this is meant as sarcasm. And it was the last time that they ever played the song, and it is the least spirited version of it. You can hear Lydon losing interest in it. And I think that, from what I understand of late 70s England, you had the rise of the National Front and all of that sort of stuff. And I get that Lydon would have looked at this very complex song. I think it's complex. It's complex in its crossing of intention from ultimate black humor, bad humor, to confrontation. I mean, I talked about that in the last video. I will talk about it again someday when I do Sex Pistols videos. I do think it is an amazing song, but I get why at this point with Lydon's with the emotional directness of the songs on the first album and what he was writing for the second, and with the sort of the storytelling aspects that he had already developed on the first album and was really going to go into on the second album, I get why he just would kind of look at this and look at the cross purposes of it and just say no. So and I don't think that that's an act of backing off or losing one's nerve. I think it's just kind of a natural evolution in his shedding of the Sex Pistols. So yeah, and then they do Public Image, and then they reprise Annalisa. It is a just an absolute fucking blinder of a gig, like spectacular, and I'll have a link to it. You should absolutely listen to it. I love it, and Eddie Edwards would have been a phenomenal addition to Public Image Limited had he not already been in the Vibrators. Or at least late February, early March of 1979. Pill now gets its fourth drummer of the year. David Humphrey, who at the time was 19 and played with a group called Seventh Seal. I have not checked them out. If you want to, by golly, you go for it. From what I understand, they were either like a jazz fusion group or a prog outfit or a jazz fusion / prog outfit. I don't know. I honestly, I've done enough without tracking that lot down. So no offense, but you know what I mean. So anyway, he was I believe they were rehearsing. Seventh Seal, I guess, was rehearsing like next door to Pill. So He was brought in. He doesn't, well, here's a shocker. He doesn't last that long. I know that is hard to believe. He lasts roughly about 2 months figure. Public Image Limited was had already started their second album in this time. So they were recording at the Manor in Oxfordshire and the Townhouse in London. The Manor is really dramatic and as a studio space. David Humphrey, when he did his interview with Fodder Stomp, let them have some photos that he took that are remarkable from his time in Pill. Some of those have been reproduced on some of the reissues, but they've been reproduced in black and white. His photos are in color. I am going to throw those up right about now. Rich? Time to do it. And there are copyrights on them. So David Humphrey, if you happen to see this and you don't like it, yes, I will redo the entire fucking video and take the photos out, but nobody's getting paid. So hopefully you won't have a problem with that, right? Cool. So, but it's on Fodder Stomp. He took the fucking photos. Like, don't steal them. I don't know. Like, is it stealing if it's free? I don't know. So I'm just going to put them up. Like, deal with it. Again, if you don't like it, I'll fucking take them down. Big deal. So anyway, but Pill was hot to get moving on the making of the next album, and the first order of business was to record Death Disco. So he plays on Death Disco. He also plays on Albatross, and my understanding is Albatross really was just kind of a more or less sort of a one take, seat of your pants, off we go, here it is type of recording. So he plays on both of those songs. So David Humphrey's drumming can be found on one other song from this period, and that is a piece of Public Image Limited lore that has been shrouded in mystery. And finally, after a few decades, there's a few beams of light that now shine upon it, that we can have at least some vague understanding of what was actually happening. So Warner Brothers Records in the United States, where Lydon was under contract, Virgin in Britain, but had rejected the release of the first album, and they apparently had created a test pressing for it, but then rejected it. And the request was that in order to get it released, and also apparently Public Image Limited had refused, or at this point were refusing to tour America, which, given the fluctuating drummers and the fact that they were now trying to make their next album, makes all the sense of the world. And they were anti-touring anyway, so the idea of them all, shipping away to America for 4 months, I get that there wouldn't be a ton of enthusiasm for that. So the Public Image Limited, whilst beginning their second album, which I don't even think at this point it was even being really conceived of as an album. I think, as Lydon and Levine note quite frequently in interviews from this time, they wanted to just release singles, basically. So, and they weren't really thinking in terms of making albums. So, the project, the mandate was that they were going to re-record the first album. And Wobble has said that he basically doesn't have any memory of re-recording the first album, and Levine and Lydon have never really commented very much on all of this. However, for decades and decades, there was a recording that came out from this time from the recording sessions of re-recording the first album, and what it was that Dave Humphrey plays on was and I don't own the a vinyl or CD of this, was the Death Disco B-side, alternately known as Half Mix or Mega Mix. The versions that I have just call it Half Mix Mega Mix on here, and I finally got it out of the car. I finally got the reissued version, the second version I had bought of the plastic box set with the very truncated little booklet there, and none of the photos and all the stuff that came with it. But again, it's also credited here as Half Mix Mega Mix for the record, because I know you guys love to see it. And you guys just can't get enough. Here, one will trot it out again. My poor mangled copy of the OG version of Plastic Box. Oh, this sad thing. I do have the booklet of it somewhere in here. So I don't know. On the vinyl, it's apparently there are apparently two mixes of it. One being called Half Mix, one being Mega Mix. There's a difference of like 10 seconds. I don't have that record, I don't know. I just have it released in multiple spots. So I'm just going to refer to it by its conjoined title of Half Mix Mega Mix, because that's the only way that I've ever heard it, god damn it. And it is a re-recording of Fodder Stomp. So, and you wouldn't necessarily know that in a way, because I think so much of the character of Fodder Stomp is the insanity of the vocal parts, but it is the same bass line. And we'll discuss that re-recording more later. But that for many years was the only Half Mix Mega Mix, which was the re-recording of Fodder Stomp, was the only thing that ever came out. David Humphrey confirmed in the Fodder Stomp interview that he did that they did re-record the song Public Image, at which point Lydon proclaimed something to the effect of, well, that was a load of crap, wasn't it? So, and that was it. So this very, very mysterious, dark little corner of Public Image Limited remained dark until, and this came out in 2018? Yeah. The 2018 box set, what is it called? The Public Image's Rotten Songs from the Heart. I always just call it Songs from the Heart, but coinciding with the documentary. This box set is truly a behemoth. It's 7 discs, 2 of which are DVDs. I will be referring to this a lot frequently later on. I will say now, though, if you have some extra bucks, snatch this up. It is well worth your time. It is the overview they deserve. Though, you know, it's funny that Public Image Limited has 2 career-spanning box sets. This one up to 92, this one up to 2015, and both of these are excellent. Both of which for completely different reasons. But this, especially because of the visual component and the wealth of outtakes and things, is really, really worth hearing. When I do later pill in the 80s and the polka dots and dreadlocks era, I will be referring to this a lot. I will also be referring to this at some point down the line when I do the commercial zone, this is what you want, this is what you get, period. So yeah, absolutely worth it. But on here, on the rarities disc, where is it? There it is, right there, disc 4, is Annalisa. And Annalisa New Mix is how it's credited, right there. I don't know if you can see that. So what pray tell, is Annalisa New Mix? Well, it is a remix of the first album's Annalisa 4, this proposed new version or American version of the first album. Now, when I listened to it, before the vocals kicked in, I actually thought it was a wholly new recording, like just a new backing track. But as I listened to it, it's especially once the vocals come in, it's very obviously the same take. I've never directly A-B'd them, but I know what fucking Annalisa sounds like. So, but it's totally Jim Walker. Like, that's clearly Jim Walker. But basically what they did was they pumped the bass up and they turned the guitars down, and the rawness of the guitars is somehow gone. The guitars sort of have not just that they're quieter, but there's sort of a muted normalizing of the guitar sound. And again, the bass is louder and somehow slicker. So it's interesting. It's not a patch on the original, but and I don't know how it really would have been all that more appealing to American audiences, because it's the same recording and it's as manic and driven and intense. So it's not like it's gussied up particularly. It's just, more vaguely danceable because it has a louder bass. The bass line is louder. So on March 21st of 1979, Pill records Death Disco and Albatross on the same day. And the complete unedited takes, I will again be talking about that in detail later, were extras on the British version of this very curious release from John Lydon's Wilderness Years, 2005's The Best of British £1 notes, or Best of British pound notes. There's apparently some sort of pun in there around Best of British, but I'm not British, so I don't really get the pun. So I don't know if it's supposed to be Best of British pound notes or Best of British £1 notes. I have no idea. But at any rate, there was a DVD that accompanied this release. That's not the version that I have. I have the 2-disc version. This barely came out in America. I don't even remember how I bought this anymore, but I somehow obtained a copy at the time. So I thought that I had the DVD of this, and I must have at some point, because I do remember having it. But I looked all over the damn place, all over the shelves right over here, and I truly could not find it. So I think I might have gotten rid of it because it didn't play. It wouldn't play on any of the devices that I have. So, and I am not smart enough to jerry rig it so it's all region. I've seen explanations of how to do it, and I'll be honest, it just goes right over my head. I just don't have the brains for that. So, as audio extras on the DVD were the full unedited monitor mixes of Albatross and Death Disco, which some people swear by. Now, I don't remember if those are on this or not. Are they? The Albatross monitor mix is on Songs from the Heart, and both monitor mixes are on the, oh boy, what a mess, are on this thing. This is, and I just don't remember what year did this come out. Yeah, 2016. The Pill Metal Box deluxe reissue that Version put out. So both of them are on here. And again, I will be talking about that more in detail as I get into actually talking about the music. But you can find that stuff here. I'm just trying to delineate these things as we go along for all of you collectors out there. David Humphrey leaves. David Humphrey, being an ambitious 19-year-old, was working with, and I don't remember, again, I just don't remember the history specifically. He was either working with Sparks or Mike Oldfield or both, and kind of gigging on the side. And was going to be appearing on Top of the Pops. I think it might have been with Sparks. And Lydon didn't really take kindly to that, that this new kid that they were bringing in was sort of already off doing that. So David Humphrey was, and apparently he never really had any conversations with Levine. Wobble was the one he got on best with, and Wobble just kind of told him, we're going to get somebody else. But but really Pill just sort of stopped calling him. It just sort of faded out. So David Humphrey kind of came and went. And who they replaced him with was Richard Dadansky. And so this video, is going to be a little bit of a justice for Richard Dadansky statement, because Richard Dadansky has really not gotten his fair shake in the telling of the story of Public Image Limited. He had been the drummer in the 101ers, so he had met the Sex Pistols pretty early on, and I guess remained close with Joe Strummer. He eventually moved to Spain later on in his life, but he was the brother-in-law of Paul Olive of the Slits, so another Slits connection, and Dadansky went on to play with the Raincoats. He's definitely the drummer on their third album, Moving, one of my favorite albums ever made. But he's also credited on the their second album, Oddie Shape, the tremendous masterpiece that I also am a very big fan of and talked about in my Nirvana video. So Richard Dadansky is doesn't even warrant a mention in the Public Image is Rotten documentary. And Martin Atkins is sort of... I always thought Martin Atkins was just straight up the drummer on most of Metal Box, but he isn't. He only plays on one song. So poor Richard Dadansky has been, to some degree, written out of history, and I wanna make sure that he gets written back into history here. So. Because I think that he's a great drummer, and I he may not have been the perfect drummer for Pill, but he is a great drummer, and he added a really, really interesting dynamic to their sound. So Richard Dadansky is actually the drummer on most of Metal Box. So he's on No Birds Do Sing, he's on Memories, he's on Graveyard, he's on Chant, and he's on Socialist. It appears, from what I can put together, I think Chant might have been the first song that they worked up with him. And again, as I talk about music, I will talk more about his playing and some of the early versions of Chant, which are really, really interesting and that are on this reissue. So that's Richard. So Richard Dadansky enters the picture, and like I said, I really want to give him his due and make sure that he is talked about glowingly and with respect and perspective. If you read interviews with Public Image Limited from around this time, you will notice a trend. You'll notice that they are constantly eviscerating the Clash. They just cannot stop themselves from ripping the Clash apart. It's almost sport for them. So, and in some ways, I suppose the Clash sort of made it easy. But it is funny how they just, predating the Nirvana Pearl Jam feud, they just can't stop themselves. So, what part of that stems from is it appears that, and I didn't know that the journalist Caroline Coon was involved in this, but apparently the idea was that Caroline Coon, I guess, was, and I might be wrong about this, but was apparently attempting to negotiate a U.S. tour on behalf of the Clash, and the idea was that Public Image Limited would be the openers. Fucking imagine that. Imagine that. Imagine, the Clash in the making of London Calling, and the 1979 incredibly combustible Pill with former Clash founder Keith Levine on guitar. So put that all together as just a mental image, and it's pretty hysterical. If like, would it have lasted one show? Like, would it have even gotten that far? Who knows? So anyway, but apparently it fell apart because I guess, according to Pill, the promoters really wanted Pill and not the Clash, and especially not the Clash as headliners. Who knows how much of that is true, but all of it appears to be very, very, very funny, and would have been kind of amazing if they had actually tried to, like, get it off the ground. But on May 31st, we have the second. So Lydon had done the televised interview the year before, but Lydon makes his next television appearance, and this is really the beginning. I don't know when I'm going to do Pill in 80 and 81. That's going to be a conjoined video that I will do at some point. I will say that doing these Pill videos has been very intensive in focus, and I look forward to doing something that won't be as commanding of all of my attention. So I'm kind of, I will pick up Pill in 80 and 81 later. I'm not really sure when. Who knows? We'll see. But obviously I'm going to do it, but it's just a matter of time. But this begins a fascinating string of Public Image Limited and John Lydon as television interrupters, and truly, truly subversive, a truly subversive presence on TV. And there have been essays and things that I've read about David Bowie as kind of an interruptive and or transgressive presence on television in the 70s, and I get that, and there is the sort of aura of alien strangeness with Bowie, and especially when he started doing things like singing medleys with Cher and being interviewed by Dinah Shore. But Bowie was a weirdly genial presence, and part of, I think, the strangeness results from the fact that outside of the couple moments with Russell Hardy, Bowie seems to be at pains to get along with the hosts, and the Lydon / Pill in this time are 100% the opposite. The alien strangeness is not because of, it is the reality of their beings is just so alien and strange, because they really are purely interruptive, and they are directly combative, and it is truly glorious to behold. It produces, I think, some of the greatest television of the second half of the 20th century. Well, there's not much in the first half, I guess, but you know what I mean. So Lydon makes his, and this will be linked, you bet your ass this is going to get linked below. Lydon makes his appearance on the long-running television show Jukebox Jury, along with Elaine Page, who apparently was in the cast of Evita, and Alan Freeman, and yes, too weird to be true, but true nonetheless, Joan Collins. Yes, that Joan Collins. They play, the only song I recognized was they played Donna Summer. They play Bad Girls, which kind of none of them liked. But Lydon just rips the songs, most of the songs apart, but he's right, but it's interesting though, because on the one hand, Joan Collins is actually pretty accurate in a lot of her critiques of things, and it's interesting because, like, Elaine Page, they're all articulate. It's interesting, but Lydon really just slices through and is absolutely hysterical, and wears the most ridiculous sort of like maroon suit with this oversized bow tie. It's spectacular. It is so kid dressing up for school who doesn't want to dress up for school. It is such a fascinating, and he would hate the term performance art because it would imply some sort of fakery or or what would the word be? Contrivance. But It is performance art in the context of it's on television. I think just somebody being that unguarded comes off maybe as performance art. So absolutely a fascinating, wonderful piece of television, and there isn't much else like it. One of the only other things I can think of that was that purely disruptive would be, and I think these have since been taken down off YouTube. But if you had ever seen the Phil Spector on the Merv Griffin show, where he's just going at people, like Leiden is kind of like that, where there's just this like, whoa, what is wrong with this guy? Or I guess maybe just in John McEnroe at the time or something like that. Like there weren't that many pop culture figures that were willing to be disliked like that, So an amazing thing to behold. Apparently, on back in Manchester, Pill perform on television live for the first time. I've never seen this performance. I don't know that there's a record of it. I've never been able to find it, so I have nothing to report on that. Apparently, Leiden, Wobble, and Levine are interviewed, but again, I've never seen it. The only thing that I could take a guess as to what it would be, but I don't know that this makes a ton of sense, is there's some Australian channel that has like a 1 minute interview with Leiden, but I don't think it's that. So I've never seen it. So I truly don't know if you've seen it or if you know where it is. Please let me know. It'd be cool to check out. So I have absolutely no fucking idea whatsoever. So, but on June 18th, the band played their next gig, and the first one with Richard Dudansky on drums. And it was at, before there was the Hacienda in Manchester, there was the Factory. So it is captured on this bootleg, which I bought in New York City several years ago. And this is a very limited pressing, as you can see. And this apparently was a popular vinyl bootleg in its day. There is an audience recording that captures one additional song. We'll get to that in a moment. But the show was officially released on the Metal Box reissue on this disc. So this is whatever it is, disc 4. So these both have the same track listing, if you want to freeze frame that. And there is a color photo from this show with Richard Dudansky on the drums, and I'll show that and I'll put that up in a second. This is a pretty and what were they called? A Certain Ratio were the opening act. So this is a pretty freewheeling show. Leiden again refers to it as a rehearsal. The version of Chant, so Chant opens things up. Chant is absolutely explosive. There was a quality, when I saw Public Image play in 2010, there was a quality to them that even, with the Bruce Smith, Lou Edmonds, Scott Firth, and Leiden lineup, that there was an explosiveness to them that was absolutely like awe-inspiring. Like truly, like the music like exploded out and absolutely overtook the room. And it really was, and I talked about this a little bit in the context of the first album, where it's not even so much that they were playing music as they were shaping sound, and they were like moving sound around, So there are parts of this gig, and Chant is a perfect example, of that, where it is so explosive and so all-consuming. This is a board recording, by the way, so it's a really, really good recording. This is really well worth hearing. There are bits and pieces of this out there on YouTube, so I'll link to whatever degree I can find it, because this one's really, really worth hearing. The version of Chant is absolutely fucking ridiculous. It's about double the length of what's on the record. It's like, it is truly, truly, truly amazing. And I want to say it's Wobble on second vocal. Then there is Death Disco. Death Disco is very good, very interesting. Death Disco as a live thing, but also as a recording. This is one of the lesser versions of Death Disco, perhaps. But then we get into Memories. Memories is amazing, and then we kind of start running into problems. The band hadn't really rehearsed, and they run into a lot of problems trying to play Public Image. They stop and start, I want to say, 2 or 3 times, and Wobble is really being very bellicose, and so bellicose that Levine offers a retort. Levine, who tends not to talk at shows, gets on the mic and offers a retort to Wobble, and there's so it's it's a odd bunch, so Public Image is not terribly great as a performance. It gets ropey, and then they come back and they do Annalisa. But then things really come together with their new song, their newest song at the time, No Birds Do Sing, which is absolutely fucking incredible, and Lydon sings it beautifully. One thing I did want to mention in the at the show with Eddie Edwards, there is a guy on the recording going, "Hey, Johnny! Johnny!" who I swear to God you can hear the Rainbow Show audiences. I wonder if it's the same guy. So, just throwing that out there. Anyway, the things one notices. But at any rate, No Birds Do Sing is absolutely fucking sparkling and incredible, and goes into places that the areas of subtlety, as subtle as you can get in a live performance with this band of intense players, that the studio recording doesn't even go into. So really, really interesting. There is apparently an audience recording of this show that includes Albatross. I tried listening to it. It doesn't sound great. Go with this. This'll, again, there are moments where things sort of fall apart. And I will say the show loses a little bit of its momentum until No Birds Do Sing in sort of the second half. So interesting to note that and tempos, even on Memories, like the tempo is sort of slower, or in some cases perhaps too slow. So it's interesting, and but it's also interesting again to hear how bellicose Wobble is, and it again is also referred to as a rehearsal. So. And again, begging the question, well, what is it that they're rehearsing for? So, and then at the end of June, they released the Death Disco single. It apparently did very well, got good reviews, or as good of reviews as Pill was going to get at that time, with the half mix, mega mix as the B-side. On July 2nd of 1979, Public Image Limited go up to Newcastle and record their infamous appearance on the television show Check It Out, which was a youth-oriented television show. Apparently, it was a special episode covering, the theme was covering the previous 25 years from Teds to Punks. Now, I previously showed this in my 85 and 86 video. This is what you get, DVD bootleg. Excuse me. this, I mentioned that I had two versions of it. This is the second version I have that has two additional discs of stuff on it. So yeah. So for many years, and this is so bootleg. This is just sort of like glued together. It's just two DVD shells glued together, then wrapped in plastic. So anyway, I would have bought this first, and then I saw this, and I'm like, oh, I have to have that. So, but it's basically just like a ported over version of this plus all this other stuff. So anyway, so for many years, this was all I had to go off of, was the Check It Out performance of this, which they had excerpted and cut down for, I guess the BBC had done a wildest television appearances of all times countdown or something. It appeared to be maybe late 80s, early 90s. I've seen the host that they cut in on the Scottish TV channel. If you've ever watched the Scottish TV channel, there's a lot of amazing stuff. It's primarily 90s orientated, and my goodness, do they have the goods. That's a hell of a channel. Endless viewing pleasure, concerts and performances of bands on TV shows and all sorts. And if you like Iggy Pop, my God, seemingly every time Iggy went to Europe, they seem to capture it. So at any rate, so that's the only context that I knew it. It was like, it's like 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes. It's a very quick clip. And then it was on YouTube in its extremely truncated state. Somebody had seen the original thing or had a copy of it somehow, and they actually, in the early internet days, they actually typed up a transcript of it, which is still available on fodderstomp.com. There was a transcript of that and the full Tom Snyder appearance, and that's what we did. That's what we did back in olden days. For any younger viewers, we would read fucking transcripts and try to imagine what it was like. So, but at some point, I forget when, but I remember I installed a video downloader just to download it. But at some point, the entire goddamn thing in pristine quality popped up on YouTube. You bet your ass I'll be linking to that. This is one of the greatest things ever filmed. Like this is like everything I love. It is so utterly mad. So. Actually, I want to say there were two versions of it, because one chopped off the part of the musical performance. But the one that's out there now, and the one I'll be linking to, is the whole goddamn thing. It's nearly 12 minutes of glory. So there is a extremely loose version of Chant that is still absolutely fucking incredible. Wobble is sitting down until at some point he goes to get up, at which Lydon interrupts himself and goes, "What's wrong now?" And Wobble gets up and starts playing standing up. So it's the very first time we see Jaw Wobble playing standing up. Very exciting, and he's kind of dancing around. Then he goes and plays behind his amplifier. Levine is fucking amazing. Like, seemingly Levine cannot play a wrong note. Do you know what I mean? Like, every single note he plays, every single idea that he generates is a good one. It is just endless flowing music from him. And even though there are repeated parts and there are refrains and themes that he works in to the songs, it really is. It's just like one big, long, glorious improvisation that's just constantly shape-shifting. Heroic, beautiful, perfect stuff. He's playing the white Travis Bean guitar. Amazing. And then Lydon looks fucking amazing, sounds amazing. Dadansky is pounding away. Dadansky is fucking fantastic. In this context, on that day, Dadansky would appear to be the perfect drummer for them. Fucking amazing. Fucking amazing. And then they sit down for the interview. And, Pill suspected that this was, once they got there, they suspected that it was a bit of a wind-up, and were suspected that it was an attempt to sort of manufacture a Bill Grundy-type situation. And they are combative from the off, and then we get to the matter at hand. The one host, so there's a guy and a girl. The guy had gone and interviewed the guitar player from the Angelic Upstarts. I'll be honest with you, I don't really know anything about the Angelic Upstarts. My only real context for them is this thing on this segment on Check It Out. And going off of this segment on Check It Out, I'm not too inclined to ever listen to them. I just don't. Yeah. So maybe I'm just a terrible closed-minded prat, but yeah, not interested. And kind of, I'll dare say, ragingly inarticulate, and just kind of repeating lots of things that lots of other people have said much better. I will say, somewhere down the line, post breakup Sex Pistols video, he does reference Jimmy Percy taking Johnny Rotten's job in the Sex Pistols, which someday I will get into. And it'll be sort of fun to talk about that. And the sheer strangeness of all of that. So anyway, of that little chapter. But they have the guy who I guess was the guitar player in the Angelic Upstarts talking about how Johnny Rotten's a ridiculous old man, and the best thing the Pistols did would have been to get rid of him and make way for the Angelic Upstarts. And then they come back and they're trying to say, like, oh, John, like, you say that you've been honest, but how honest can you be? This guy started off just like you, and he says you're a sellout. And that's when it's really off to the races. And John just obliterates these idiots, and it is glorious to watch, right down to him swearing and referencing Grundy directly, but in a sort of an over-affected camp way, and going, sorry, rude word, and rolling his eyes. It's the greatest eye roll that has ever been filmed, and you really, like, the cheapskate comedy interrogation act, like, every choice of word that Lydon uses is, like, basically as good as his lyrics. And then he, you know, they're like, oh, sounds like we've heard this story before. And Lydon goes, really? Would you like to tell me where? And with that, good night, takes off the mic and walks off. Lydon, by the way, looks fucking amazing, if I hadn't already said that. Like, the oversized suit, like, and I said this in the last video, like, literally, every item of clothing these guys chose was the exact right item of clothing. Like, they are the thing, you know? And, by the way, as the camera pans, as John walks back and forth, you will notice that there is a magazine Secondhand Daylight poster up. I just thought I would point that out. I thought that was interesting one time when I was watching this. I have watched this many times. I've actually I'll go so far as to say, I've analyzed this shit like it's the fucking Zapruder film. Like, I am fascinated with the Check It Out performance. I cannot recommend it enough. It is glorious, glorious television. And then with that, fucking Wobble just swoops right in, and, like, it just keeps eviscerating them even further. Like, try and think of an intelligent question to ask. Like, amazing. And then Keith Levine just utters that this is a cop-out. And with that, Wobble, it's a cop-out and a storm of expletives, and it's all bleeped out. And Wobble walks off. Wobble looks as awesome and cool as Lydon does. I mean, like, they are, like, I don't know. I love it. I love them, and I love them as an entity, and it's just one of my favorite things. I'm sure it was horrible for them, and that it was gross and awful for them to be dragged into it. But I, as a viewer decades later, to watch something that real be dragged into something that is that much of a contrivance, the clash of that is incredible. And their unwillingness, their absolute unwillingness to play ball. And again, John uses the word condescend, that they don't condescend. And I think that really sums things up. So the show is aired a few days later, and there's a press furor, though not nearly as bad as the one that followed the Bill Grundy appearance. It is around this time that the article in the NME comes out, and where Jeanette Lee really starts to get a public face. And I will just talk about Jeanette Lee briefly. Levine, her and Levine at some point eventually became a couple, but Wobble was very against her coming into the group. and was like, well, what is she, just going to be a secretary? But the thing that Lydon and Levine seemed to really bond over was the idea that they really wanted to merge film and music together. That really seemed to be what they wanted Public Image Limited to be. I will touch upon that more when I do the 1980-81 video down the road. Because they started making tentative steps in 80 and 81 towards trying to realize some sort of vision in that direction. But Lee, my understanding is that Lee really was there not just to make sure that record sleeves and stuff got designed properly, but apparently the idea was that she was going to be the film person at some point. So then on July 9th, Public Image Limited, and this is out there on YouTube, but also here on one of the DVDs, they filmed the video for Death Disco. It's the next logical continuation of the Public Image film. This time, it's ostensibly the same idea of a filmed performance, except this time it's lots of cutaways. It's very pre-MTV with its sort of rapid style editing, but filmed in an even more dramatic fashion, because now they are doing this sort of exploding plastic inevitable thing of having films projected onto them. So it is darker, it is even more shadowy, it is even more ominous, which is then made all the more off-putting, which with Check It Out and with what comes next, Wobble's kind of disconcerting habit of constantly turning towards the camera and sort of doing this sort of rictus kind of jack-o'-lantern hi mom sort of grin. He was missing a tooth, so sort of showing that off. But it's an amazing, beautiful music video, and again, another piece of just like beautiful experimental film. And then 3 days after filming that, they go on Top of the Pops, and they do a truncated version of Death Disco. It's like 2.5 minutes. Is it on here? I actually don't bloody remember. It is on here, yeah. So it is on the DVD on this. So you can see it on here. There is a version in not as good quality on YouTube. Lydon sings live over the backing track, but I think Dadansky, they had like plastic cymbals. I think Dadansky is playing live drums, so it's like a live drum, live vocal version. It's okay. I mean, it is what it is. It's a Top of the Pop performance with 2 live aspects to it. So, like, I don't think it's interesting and fascinating, but especially it's not even the best Pill Top of the Pops performance. That will come later in the next video at some point. So it's interesting. The audio of it is also out there. The audio of it is on. The audio is on here. So interesting performance, but. Again, Public Image Limited on television, I would not say, oh my God, you absolutely have to check this one out. I would absolutely direct you elsewhere. First of all, this is the Rich of today. The Rich of yesterday had a really bad headache, so eventually he came to an impasse where he could do no more. So, like the last video, like the last Pill video, we have the contrasting riches. So, at any rate, so on September the 8th, Public Image Limited went to Leeds and performed at the Queen's Hall. There was something called Futurama 79, the world's first science fiction music festival. On the bill were Cabaret Voltaire, OMD, Cabaret Voltaire, who I'm glancingly, who I know a little bit about. I had a compilation at one point, and I'm not really sure what became of it. OMD, who, I'll be perfectly honest with you, other than the Peter Saville album covers and the one big 80s song, I know nothing about. But also sharing the bill at this sci-fi music convention, were the Public Image Limited's true counterparts, the other set of governors of post-punk, the one and only Joy Division. So that is a hell. That's a hell of a bill. So and I have never really talked all that much about Joy Division. I think I've only ever made one sort of glancing reference to them before, but like they're fucking Joy Division for God's sake. So anyway, the entire so apparently there was a vinyl bootleg of Public Image Limited's set. There is the entire show out there, and when I say entire show, I mean all 4 acts. And I will put a link to, I guess, the playlist. But the pill set is clearly, the audio is clearly sourced from the vinyl bootleg. You can hear the pops and crackles. And the show itself was a big problem. And Pill did not go on until apparently like around 1 in the morning. And the sound of the show is, the one review that I read described it as boomy. And that is very true. Apparently it was a very big room. The audio fidelity is not great. However, they open with Chant. And so the rumors, there's been a lot of lore around this show. And at the beginning of it, and I had listened to I just didn't have time to check out Cabaret Voltaire and OMD, but I did listen to Joy Division's show, and they played an absolute fucking stonker of a set. Like, they're Joy Division, they're in their prime. And, they were playing with their idol in John Lydon on the bill. So Joy Division, delivered the fucking goods. So you can check that out in the playlist. Pill, but I had always heard that this was a bad show. John Lydon himself said it was a bad show, that they had no business being there, on and on. And I started listening to it, and it opens up with Chant, another kind of longer version of Chant, and it is absolutely fucking phenomenal. And it has, again, that quality that I talked about, where they are bigger than themselves. It explodes out. Dansky's perfect. The band is perfect. Unbelievable. And then they go straight into Annalisa. Again, amazing. Hypnotic, they play Memories. They play Low Life. And somewhere in there, things start to kind of go somewhat off the rails. Not completely, but they are clearly having a lot of sound problems. And the rest of the set is Public Image, Attack, Death Disco, Another. They premiered Another, and No Birds Do Sing. I will say that in particular, Another and No Birds Do Sing are probably the weakest stuff, other than the Paris 78 show. But that's, again, I think really kind of mostly down to fidelity, just really bad fidelity. But these are performances that are just, these last couple songs are just not up to their standards, especially compared to the Manchester performance of No Birds Do Sing, which is kind of unexpectedly glorious and features some beautifully controlled Lydon singing and new ways of phrasing. So it sounds to me, so the show kind of just goes not straight downhill, but downhill. And I would have put it down to that they were clearly having sound problems, and they were having problems adjusting to the room. Wobble and Levine are great. John does what he can. There is sometimes a tentativeness to Keith Levine's playing. But for whatever reason, they really blamed Dadansky. They claimed that he was too nervous doing shows. He was too nervous to keep time. They also claimed that he had an issue with amphetamine sulfate. So apparently the gig was really bad, and Levine, I guess, really flipped out at some point after the show. And Wobble was usually the more interruptive one, but I guess Levine really lost his shit on Dudansky. Pill never wanted to tour. They wanted each show to be a special event. They wanted each show to be a happening. We can see up to this point that they would try to put cool bills together or be part of cool bills, and not just make it a rock band on tour. Levine apparently cited the Leeds show as the reason why they just shouldn't, at that point, even do any. That they should just not even be on the road in even the small capacity that they were. So a couple days later, or a couple days after the show, Dudansky leaves the band. He had another Pill drummer to leave the band, and writes a nasty letter to the press, criticizing Pill, and then they just come back that much harder. Apparently, though, the issue with amphetamine sulfate, as a reason why he had to be fired from the group. Dudansky talked about how that was very absurd coming from the areas that in the group that had leveled that accusation. And I might as well get to this now. I talked a little bit before about the sort of aura of darkness surrounding Public Image Limited in 1979. I might as well just sort of get to it, because Dudansky, again, like the previous drummers, talked about this issue, that the band just didn't really do anything other than recording, which they would do very quickly. There just sort of wasn't really activity, and there wasn't really much in the way of even just kind of doing rehearsals or any sort of having any kind of schedule. What apparently that a lot of that was down to was Levine. Levine had a heroin habit, and is that why they kicked him out of the Clash? Who knows? Levine always claimed that it wasn't that. But person after person after person after person in Public Image Limited world talks about that. It really was a problem, and it was a major reason why the band just didn't do more, and didn't do much of it very often. Wobble has talked about, so one of the common things that's cited with Public Image Limited is that they were all on different drugs, and that was a big part of the problem. Wobble tended, I guess, to speed and alcohol mostly. Lydon, I think, was in that direction, but then you had Levine on Smack. What Wobble pointed to, though, in an interview was, and this is one of the sort of legendary things about Lydon, is Lydon famously will just sit and watch television for days and days, just hour after hour after hour. He doesn't like going to sleep. These are things I very much relate to, and I too can just endlessly watch television with the sound off. I don't really need to have the sound on. So, and I often don't like going to bed, and it's only because of my wonderful wife that I do go to bed on with any sort of regularity, and my days of pushing myself to just never sleep. That has really sort of come to an end. But at any rate, so I get it. But Wobble postulates that Lydon was post his mother, post Sid, post the cartoonization of the Sex Pistols, that Lydon was just dealing with profound depression, and what the endless hours of sitting watching television, what that really was about, was that he just was in a complete like depressive state, and that was how that was the coping mechanism available to him. So you have Lydon, who was sort of checked out psychologically, but then you had Levine checked out physiologically. So yeah, and Dudansky complained about that. So apparently tensions were high before they even went to Leeds. Dudansky was very irritated that the band just did nothing, and yeah, I will say of his playing at the Leeds show, I don't know so much that it's tempos that are the problem. I think tempos were more the problem with his first Manchester show. But there is a oh god, and because I really like Dudansky, but there is something of a stiltedness to some of his playing by the time we get mid to late set. And in the end, what I think I would posit about Dudansky, because he is a very fine drummer, and I think that he warrants mention. And as I talk more about the album proper, I'll touch upon his drumming more. But there was, I think, for lack of a better word, I think that Dudansky would have fit in better with the later Dreadlocks and Polka Dots era of Pill, perhaps. Or his drumming would have been phenomenal on album. I think it's kind of a Danny Peters in Nirvana situation, where very good drummer, Danny Peters, great for Mudhoney, just not great for Nirvana. And I think that that's kind of the situation here, perhaps. But a very fine drummer, a very underrated drummer, and again, kind of weirdly written out of history. And I want, like I said before, like I said yesterday, I wanted to ideally write him back in or talk him back in, if nothing else. So anyway, so there was a brief feud with Dudansky in the press. Excuse me, and then they quickly got fall drummer, Carl Burns. Now, Carl Burns, very, 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 very famous lore around poor Carl Burns. So the lore for ages around him, and Carl Burns only lasted maybe about 2 weeks, roughly. And Pill was trying to get Metal Box finished. So they're at the Manor, and they're trying to wrap the album up, right? And so it doesn't, Dudansky leaves at like a really bad time for them. And so Carl Burns comes in, and again, drummer with the Fall, and the lore around Carl. So Carl doesn't play anything at all they don't do any shows with him, and he doesn't perform anywhere on Metal Box or any B-sides or anything. The lore around Carl Burns for many years, and this was like the one thing that I knew about him, was that, and this is the story as I heard it, and then we'll get to the story as it actually is, apparently. The story that I heard it was, so we knew that Wobble had a kind of a violent streak, and sort of a thuggish streak, and could go mad with his chopper, and could be very physically intimidating. And he was kind of bigger than the rest of them, and had working class toughness, right? And in a fit of being prankish, but also kind of thuggish, as Carl Burns was sleeping at Gunter Grove, in like a mattress on the floor in the sort of squat conditions of the Gunter Grove sort of was, that Wobble wanted to see, in the middle of the night, wanted to see if the name Carl Burns could become literally true and set his blanket on fire. So, in fact, he truly would be Carl Burns. That's the story as I always heard it. So apparently that is not true. Wobble explained what actually happened. What turned into that story was an LSD-fueled live reenactment of Space Invaders, where various pill people set fire to newspapers while marching Space Invader style towards Burns, who pretended to shoot at them. Who knows? But at any rate, Carl Burns was not long for Pill. He comes and goes in a matter of about 2 weeks. He doesn't record anything. He was in the Fall before. He goes back to the Fall. And so that's the story of Carl Burns, coming and going. So then we get Martin Atkins. Martin Atkins finally joins Public Image Limited after all this time. So apparently Martin Atkins, and I don't need to, he was gigging, he had been gigging for a long time. He had been gigging with a bass player named Pete Jones. Make note of the name. He'll come up whenever I get to that era of Pill. Pete Jones will come up again. But Martin Atkins apparently had first tried to become the drummer for Public Image Limited at the same auditions that brought in Jim Walker, and I forget what happened. He either got there late, or he showed up too early or too late. I don't remember. But then just before Dadansky joined, he tried to join again. And interestingly enough, both Dadansky and Martin Atkins were recruited by Levine. So Martin Atkins shows up in the Public Image is Rotten documentary. He tells the story of he had to go down to the manor, and and he thought they were going to rehearse or run through old numbers from the first album or something. He walks in, there's a plexiglass, the baffle set up with drums, and Wobble is there, and he walks in, and somebody points him in the direction of the drums, and they say, "Rolling," and he's like, "What, rolling? What's happening?" And him and Wobble just start playing, and that becomes Bad Baby. And that was it. He was more or less in the group. Sometimes more, sometimes less. The saga of Martin Atkins is a very complicated one, and as we, at some point in the future when I do 80, 81, 82, and 83, the saga of Martin Atkins becomes even more convoluted. So Martin Atkins, is probably the in the same way that, like, Bill Stevenson is probably the definitive drummer for Black Flag, simply because he's just kind of there, and that he's able to navigate he's able to bridge all these different eras. That's sort of what Martin Atkins is for Public Image Limited. He winds up bridging kind of 3 eras of the band, and I talked about Jim Walker's sense of sonic identity on the next album, which I'll get to eventually, because I am gonna do this. It's just, I need to not be in Pill World for a little bit after this, but Martin Atkins' sense of sonic identity on the next album is profound, and it's as profound as Wobble, it's as profound as Levine, and it's about as profound as Lydon. So, and then, Martin Atkins goes on to have like Wobble, he winds up going on to have a very storied career with Pigface and the Revolting Cocks and a million other things. And is very beloved. I follow him. I follow him on Instagram. And he's just, I think he's taught college courses. He's wrote a book on how to tour and not lose your shirt. He's a very well respected, very beloved sort of member of the musical world. Martin is kind of in. He's never like fully in, at least not for a while. I think I want to say the Pill were just so burned with having such a succession of drummers that I think the idea was that it really was at this point Wobble, Levine, and Lydon. So there is a note on the Fodder Stomp chronology that around this time they do an interview with The Face, and that at Gunter Grove there are two dog water bowls for dogs. One is at Gunter Grove, and one is marked Steve, and the other is marked Paul, which I think is really, really, really funny. So the band finishes up Metal Box late September, early October of '79, and the lineup kind of splinters a little bit, and they really do become for a while they really do become a little bit more specifically a studio outfit. Levine winds up playing the drums on Pop Tones, but then what the hell did happen there? We're not putting that in the video. Levine winds up playing the drums on Pop Tones. And then there's the Suit, which is basically all Wobble until Lydon gets hold of it and adds piano and vocals. I want to say that's the case. I'm just going to check my notes really quickly, but I think that's what it is. Yeah. And then there is the phenomenon of Radio 4, which is the last thing recorded. For Metal Box, and it was kind of a. So I might as well get into this. Levine went through a period in the making of this album, and then in the future, and during the next album, where Levine was trying to bring more people into the group, musically speaking. So he brought in a guy by the name of Ken Lockey, who was the leader of this band, the Cowboys International. And Cowboys International, by the way, the drummer, this guy you might recognize, is Terry Chimes, the original Clash drummer, or Tory Crimes as he's credited. And so Ken Lockey was the singer, but Keith Levine plays on this album. This is their first album, The Original Sin, and Keith Levine plays on the song Wish, does a great job on it. This is a really cool record, really interesting record. I like it a lot. But at any rate, Keith Levine was trying to figure out a way to get Ken Lockey in the group. Lydon, as we will see when Keith Levine on the next album tries to bring another person in the group, Lydon did not like that at all and firmly rejected the idea. And my understanding is that Ken Lockey played some of the pianos on some of those keyboards on Radio 4, but I don't know how much of it was Levine and how much of it was him. But they do the initial recording, and then Keith takes it and and I'll be getting into this later. The original Radio 4 Keith sculpts and edits and mixes into what you finally hear on the album. But if Keith had had his way, Ken Lockey would have been brought into the group at this point. So on October the 10th, Pill releases their next single, and that would be, and this one I do have, and that is Memories. So first of all, here's the mirror that'll pop up. Speaking of the next album, here's the mirror that'll pop up in the iconography for that. But the collage on the sleeve of Memories is, this would have been an eBay purchase in the 2000s, back in the good old eBay days. So I love this. I love this artwork. Lydon did the artwork for Death Disco. That'll be in the JPEG. You can see that, and it's his inimitable artistic style that winds up popping up in Pill artwork later on. But the photos of the on here are great because it's Lydon dressed up like kind of World War II era clothing, and the woman in the blonde wig is Jeanette Lee. So I absolutely love these staged wedding photos. This is just absolutely beautiful, beautiful artwork. What a beautiful collage. Like, I absolutely love this. So I will be honest, I don't know if Dennis Morris is responsible for this, but whoever is responsible for it is absolutely fucking brilliant. So love it. And the B-side is Another, and I will talk about that in due time. But Another is the song Graveyard with vocals. So I'll get into that as we discuss the music. It would have been around this point that that Metal Box should have been actually released. Oh yeah. Speaking of October of 1979, that's actually when the original Sin came out, just so you know. And since we're talking about, briefly about outside Pill activities, it's somewhere in here, Wobble puts out the Dan MacArthur single. I'm not going to get, from this video onwards, I'm not going to touch too much upon Wobble's solo activities, only in the context as it crosses over at a musical Venn diagram with Pill, because it is one of the factors that eventually leads to his ouster from the group. So at any rate, but Metal Box should have been out by this point. So the release of Metal Box was pushed back again and again because of arguments with Virgin over how it was going to get paid for, how it was going to be assembled, where it was going to be assembled, what the price of the actual record should be, etc., etc. And then it was pushed back again because a bunch of the metal canisters were accidentally destroyed while they were being delivered to CBS for assembly. So, but on October 23rd, Metal Box, after much Sturm und Drang and a succession of drummers, was finally released. And it was 3 separate 12-inch records played at 45 and housed in a metal container. I will now pull mine off the shelf. Yes, here it is. So, and apparently it was supposed to have tape sealing it together. My understanding is the tape never actually made it on, but there were rolls of tape that apparently Martin Atkins had that had the Pill logo that was supposed to, and somebody somewhere decided, simply put, that it was too expensive. So there were Pill had to put in £35,000 from their own advance to get the record made. So they were not making any money off of this. I mean, all of their money went back into the packaging. And, Lydon has said before, I think I might have mentioned this in the 85, 86 video, Lydon has mentioned that he always wanted the packaging of his albums to be like an extra song or a song in and of themselves. In other words, part of the content. So 50,000 Virgin agreed to make it. They didn't want it to be a limited edition run. I mean, this was how they wanted the album to come out. But the best that they could get out of Virgin was to make 50,000 of them, with another 10,000 set for import. That, of course, didn't stop. That, of course, did not stop imports from being grossly inflated at import prices. The name of the album being the Metal Box is because the album, the canisters were sourced from the Metal Box company in Hackney, so they just simply named Metal Box after the company that provided the canisters. And also interestingly, Public Image Limited did not provide promotional copies for the press. So the press had their go at Pill, and certainly Lydon had a history of them with the Sex Pistols. So in another sort of daring move, they didn't court favor with the press by sending out any freebies. So apparently there was an insert that included the original copies, but I've never seen one of these. But original copies apparently had a slip of paper on the inside that I guess had the track listing and had the private phone numbers of Jeanette Lee and Dave Crow. And Dave Crow was listed as the secretary. So the other thing is Virgin would not spring for a lyric sheet. They felt that the album was already too expensive to produce. So, on November the 24th, Pill took out ads in all of the music press with words from the Metal Box. They printed a 2-page lyric sheet. And if I can find it, I'll throw that up here. If you see nothing right now other than my lovely face, that means I couldn't locate it. I have seen it. I have seen reproductions of it before, though. So, also produced radio ads. Levine and Lydon worked on radio ads for the album that I have never heard and appear to, unfortunately, have been lost to history. I want to say Levine referenced that. I read in an interview once that he referenced the radio ads, but I've never heard them. I've never heard them bootlegged. If you know, if you've heard them or you know where they are, please let me know, because that would be cool. It'd be interesting to hear that. And then I guess we will get to I'll be linking all of the press the Pill did below, but the particular one that I would draw your attention to is the article with the venerable British music journalist Chris Needs. If you've watched any under review documentary things, especially anything punk related, Chris Needs is always in there, and I really like him. He's really smart, and Chris Needs famously hung out with Pill for, like, I don't know, 18, 30, whatever it was, hours for a magazine called Zigzag. And that's a pretty fascinating article. It's really, really, really interesting. And I if you're going to read any of the Pill stuff, read the Zigzag article. That would be the one. But also, apparently, accompanying that article was another round of the lyric sheet, which included a comment from Lydon saying, "Why don't you rip this out and fold it into your copy of the album?" So, so on December the 17th, of 1979. Public Image Limited, with Martin Atkins, now officially their drummer, recorded a Peel session. They recorded 3 songs for this Peel session. Now, I would have first heard the Peel session on disc 1 of Plastic Box. Here's the janky copy, and here is again the. Right. So it was on here, and then they came out again on. So Leiden has put these out a few times over the years. Are they on here? I believe they are. I believe that they're on this as well. My goodness. Yep. So all 3 are on the Songs from the Heart box set, and then they are on the massive. Oh my goodness. They are on the massive 2016 CD reissue, of course. So, and that disc is right here. This kind of reprising the Death Disco artwork, single artwork. So anyway, with Martin Atkins in tow as the drummer, they do pop tones. So again, my listening to this on Plastic Box, in a weird way, these became sort of the definitive versions of these songs for me in a weird way. So I have listened to them a lot because I really spent a lot of time with Plastic Box. It really reshaped my understanding of Pill in a lot of ways. So the version of Pop Tones is absolutely incredible. It's beautiful. It's terrifying. It's all of those things. I'll be getting into that more. But Leiden's vocal performance is perfect. The band is perfect. And it's just fucking amazing. And Martin Atkins fits like a glove. Some of the slight stylistic divergence of Richard Dudansky is gone. And while he doesn't have the immediate sonic identity of Jim Walker, he clearly fits in better than Dave Humphrey. So he's amazing on it. And but then we get into careering, and careering is about 7.5 minutes, or maybe a little bit longer than 7.5 minutes. I think it's just under 8 actually. And you can make an argument, kind of like, again, the Black Flag video, Black Flag in 82, where I say, like, in some ways, the live and studio stuff from Black Flag in 82 kind of is the definitive version of those songs, with all due respect to what wound up on My War and Slip It In, etc. The version of careering, so by this point Keith Levine had gotten himself a Prophet 5 synthesizer, and this heavily features the synth. There is a version, if you get all excited and go out onto YouTube, they filmed in January, February of 1980, they filmed 2 songs to the Old Grey Whistle Test. They do a second version of careering for that. I'm not going to be linking that. I will link that in the next video. But that sometimes purports to be the Peel Sessions version, but it wasn't. Peel Sessions was for radio. Old Grey Whistle Test was filmed for television. So, also that version is like 2 full minutes shorter. So, I will not be linking that for this. When I do the 8081 video, that'll be in there. But I will be linking to the Peel Sessions. I'm sure they're on YouTube. I'll find them. I'll link them. You can make an argument for this version of careering at the Peel Session, December 17th, 1979, as the single best fucking thing that Public Image Limited ever recorded. It is truly the sound of the future. It is the sound of the future that never happened. It still sounds like the future. It was terrifying and imposing and endlessly awe-inspiring when I first heard it. and I would have been first hearing it, nearly 20 years, or about 20 years after its release, right? So I cannot imagine what it sounded like back then. I feel like in the same way that I can't imagine what Jimi Hendrix would have sounded like in 1968, I can't imagine what Pill would have sounded like in 1979. This is still brave. It is music of the future. It is timeless in that it is outside of time, and it's outside our understanding of time. I don't even know what to say. Keith's synth deconstructions and the expansiveness and what he throws in, mixing in some guitar stuff, but really, really, really focusing on just this sound exploration device in the context of Wobble and Atkins really locking in. You have that perfect of a rhythm section. You have John Lydon, the best frontman in the fucking world at the time, and had some stiff competition, front person, because he had some stiff competition from Polly Styrene and Ian Curtis and many others. But John's the fucking man. And so you have the ultimate frontman, you have this ultimate rhythm section, especially with Wobble, this ultimate bass player, and then you've got Keith, who just fucking takes over. And this is why Public Image Limited are the fucking, to use a British term, are the fucking governors of post-punk. I mean, this is it. It's a witheringly perfect, ultimate fucking musical statement. I cannot stress that you listen to this enough. It is as good as music gets. It'll be linked below. For the love of God, listen to it. Do yourself a favor. And then they wrap it up with Chant, studiofying it. People think that Peel sessions were strictly live. They weren't. They are technically studio recordings, and Peel kind of used that to their advantage and just create a beautiful, amazing alternate version. It's not as expansive as the Dudansky versions. It is now boiled down and more honed and focused. And it's Pill's punk song, quote unquote, but punk beyond punk, and some whole other world of aggression and intensity and expression, abstract expressions of anger. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's again an incredible fucking performance, and fit in on Plastic Box perfectly, coming in between the songs from the first album, and then most of the second disc is Metal Box, and the first disc of Plastic Box is then rounded out with some of the Metal Box songs, but it just fits in perfectly and is a sort of a perfect bridge between these two periods. But really, they are, at this point on that recording, they are the best fucking band in the world. They are fucking white hot. They are also, in some weird ways, I'm sure Lydon wouldn't appreciate this, me phrasing it this way, but they are the fulfillment of the promise of what the Velvet Underground, or some of the stuff in the late 60s, like the United States of America, or even some of the Silver Apples or something, like what that stuff prefigured. Pill, not that I'm saying that they were lifting from anything or anything like that, but those is the word incohate. I don't know how to pronounce that word. Elements, those strands that were being picked up, Pill takes and synthesizes into a free form language that is so immediate, so intense, so fully formed. Free form and fully formed, and just that they really are these incredibly impressive blocks of musical sections that Lydon and Levine, for that matter, can, in a very modular, improvised way, move things in and out as they feel needed in the moment. It just, staggering. So listen to the fucking Peel sessions for this stuff, because it's as serious stuff gets. Incredible. All right, we are finally going to talk about music, so very exciting. So I will say from the off, I have found this video intimidating to make, not just because of all of the various strands of the tale to tell, but also talking about this music I find really hard, partially because of my reverence for Pill, but also because there is a quality that there's very little other music to compare it to. I would say Dylan live in '66. I would say Miles Davis's stuff from sort of that run from Bitches Brew to Agharta and Pangea. Some Fela Kuti stuff. Some Funhouse. There's certain music that goes somehow beyond music or even beyond songs and goes really purely into some sort of extrasensory experience. And I talked about this, I think I talked about this again in the Black Flag video. A lot of overlap for me in terms of my feelings about these two groups. And it's both an amazing band and also this kind of ultimate art project that is kind of endlessly deep and something to sort of endlessly penetrate. But where there is something to paraphrase what I had said in that about when Pete Townsend was talking about Jimi Hendrix, of that there's I talked about it in the Stooges video. That's when I talked about that of music, that the way that it reverberates purely around the room and the way that it bounces around and creates harmonics. I feel like that's what happens with Public Image Limited. And I want to say that I remember an interview with Keith Levine where he talked about the phenomenon of his playing, and what the band did, and what the band did in terms of being this sort of extrasensory listening experience, and how the somehow the music itself was its own entity. And that there was some sort of study done that it's something like 1 in 30,000 people. I don't remember the specifics of the study. It's now been many years, but that most people actually literally can't hear all of the music that's happening, the full range of it. Like their ears literally just, like the brain doesn't process it. So I sometimes think that maybe, I normally sort of don't say this or think this way, but I think in some cases maybe perhaps some of this music kind of isn't for everyone, in part because I think that there's sort of so much that happens in terms of the extrasensory aspect of it that some people's brains just might not be wired for it. That doesn't make you better or worse. That just is a physiological fact. So I don't know too much of the hard science of that, but it is interesting to think about. Now, there's not much to say in terms of my history with this album. I don't need to spend a lot of time on that. The first time I ever heard anything was I heard Death Disco, Memories and Careering on this, the first thing I ever got from Pill. So Death Disco, if Public Image was the first song I ever heard, Death Disco sealed it forever. Death Disco was one of the most impressive, mind-blowing things I'd ever heard. I was absolutely, utterly in love with it. It made me a fan forever. That one song, the strength of that one song, sealed it. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but just that my first Pill purchase, proper album, would have been this second edition. This is your standard American version of this album. I will be getting into the artwork for this in a little bit, but yeah. So this is what I would have owned and listened to for many years, and we're putting that right back on the shelf. But that'll sort of be covered more in the next video. So what I have here is I would have purchased this. This is again Four Men with Beards coming up yet again. Four Men with Beards reissued this in 2006. I'm pretty sure that I got this in 2006 on a trip to Portland, where the sullen, heavily pierced, facial piercing girl behind the counter acted as if she was giving me water in the desert by selling this to me. The attitude pouring off of her, and the glare of contempt as I asked for this, because it was stationed just behind the counter. She had to reach for it, and I'm sure that just ruined her day. So I will never forget. So if gal in Portland from way back then, if you ever see this, come on. I hope you've grown up a little bit since then, because what the fuck was all of that about? So anyway, so this actually did have tape. I don't know if you can see, but I ripped off a part of it and just affixed it back here to sort of preserve a little bit. But it actually was taped. I'm finally going to open this up. I am highly reticent to open this up because, as we all know, the contents are a little hard to handle. So mine does have a slip sheet with the track listing and noting that Dave Crow and Jeanette Lee are members of the band, but then there's like the Four Men with Beards info. And then there is the slip, and I'm not going to take all of these out, just so you get the general idea. And here is the record, and there is a little piece of hair. Yikes. Okay, so there is the record itself. I don't think the original ones had any number on them. As you can see, that's side 1. And then to get them out, I very delicately shimmy them out. Apparently people had all sorts of problems getting these things out without the records actually scratching or breaking. And then there's side 2, helpfully labeled with a little number 2. So all the labels are like that. All have pill. The original idea was that, and this is played at 45. The original idea was simply that to increase the fidelity, and Pill wanted to treat it as singles. Now, OG copies, I have seen some pretty rough ones. I think if you're a fan, you have as well. You might even own one. And if you do own one and you feel like posting a photo, and I don't know if I think YouTube allows that, throw in a photo of it. That would be cool. By only a frame of reference with film canisters, my grandfather had a 24 millimeter reel-to-reel projector and collected films and shot a lot of his own. So this would have been a family trip to Antioch, the Brookfield Zoo, Carol's Communion, and the Gersh family. I'm not really sure what the Gershes were doing, but this is on Eastman Kodak. But as you can see, as time goes by, it becomes kind of oxidized and sooty. So I've seen some pretty gnarly, rusted up versions. I have had this since 2006, and it's still spry, still in basically the shape that I got it in. I'll be honest, I don't play it that often for fear of damaging it. Though I have been listening to it for the purposes of this review. Normally, I'll be honest with you, since the reissue, what I have listened to is just simply this. On the reissue, it sounds fucking amazing. They did a phenomenal job. Most of the time, I just reach for this. The way that I would have listened to it before that was my ex-wife had a 2-disc set. I have no idea if she still has it. It's now been many years, but that had the first album on disc 1 and then second edition on disc 2. So I would normally just grab it off her shelves and listen to it if I wanted to hear it. Or I could, if I wanted to play it on vinyl, I still would just play the second edition version on vinyl. But there were a few years there where I didn't have an operating record. I didn't really have an operating turntable set up, and that just was not, tenable. So yeah. So I guess we will get into the first song. So the first song on disc 1 is Albatross, the sprawling 10-minute epic opener of the album. And it's a fascinating counterpoint to Theme off the first album, another sprawling epic opener. This one, whereas that was doom-laden and intense and excoriating, this is actually interestingly confident, especially Keith's guitar playing. Keith, as I have noted before, there's been another development of his style. He, and also when I say where things are in the speakers, this is as I'm facing the stereo, so just reverse it, but Keith is on the left, and the sort of the confidence and the strut of Keith's playing is really, really beautiful. And his melting glass guitar tone and just his choice of notes, that combination of the content of what he's actually playing meets the sound of what he's doing, the outcome, where intention and outcome constantly are colliding in glorious, glorious ways. And then dead center, you have Wobble and you have Dave Humphreys. This, of course, recorded at the Manor. The engineer, interestingly, the man who unleashed the 1,000 hellacious gated drum sound records in the 80s, Hugh Padgham. So it's Hugh Padgham. You can clown on what he did in the 80s, and Lord knows I love to. But no, Hugh Padgham was an engineer for this. So you've got to give the man his due. So anyway, and then you have Wobble and Dave Humphreys in the middle. Dave Humphreys is awesome on this. In the interview with Fodder Stomp, he talks about his sort of signature on the hi-hat. His hi-hat playing is in fact wonderful. And his drum patterning is wonderful. And maybe he could have had a future with Pill. Who knows? I just don't think that he was temperamentally sort of cut out to stay with the group. But musically, it made sense, and he fits in with Wobble. Wobble's ability to adapt to drummers, I should say, is remarkable, especially for such a kind of untutored player. Wobble... Keith is so exploratory that Wobble really does kind of become the band leader. I mean, Wobble, again, really is the musical engine room of this whole thing. And just as there has been a evolution of what Keith does, there has now been an evolution of what Wobble does. Wobble's bass lines are actually, I don't want to say simpler, but they aren't. There was an occasional naughtiness to his playing on the first album. I don't mean that as a criticism. And some of what I called all-action bass lines. One of the things that's so immediately striking is what he's doing here is elegant. It's every note is perfect. There is not one needless note. This is the ultimate in I don't know, minimalism, I guess, but discipline, musical intelligence and discipline. And Wobble is basically just like laying down Mondrian paintings in sound. They're perfect, they're clean, and they're elegant. And he does it again and again and again and again. And you could say that this is Wobble's album. Most people would. There are some purists that no Wobble, no Pill. And you can make that case, and you can sound like an intelligent person making that case. I don't particularly agree with that. Because I think as much as this is Wobble's album, I think it has to be Levine's album and it has to be John's album. I mean, you have three ridiculous musical forces at the heights of what they do. So, but Wobble laying it down, Keith's magnificent, just weaving guitar playing. I mean, this is perfect stuff, and it's sort of as perfect as music gets. It was an improvisation. It was an open-ended improvisation, and Lydon just sort of comes in over the top with brilliant, brilliant, brilliant fucking lyrics. I would have to imagine. People have said that this was about Sid. And did Lydon maybe say it was about Sid? Maybe he said that himself. I want to say that might have been in the OG Plastic Box book. He said that. I don't remember, though. It's been many years since I've seen that booklet. I know I have it, but I just don't know exactly where it is. But I feel it really is about McLaren, especially the Still the Spirit of '68. McLaren, of course, was highly informed by his student experiences in the late '60s, and I think that at university in the Paris uprising and all of that stuff. So I think that that's a very specific example that the detail of that would, to my mind, point to it being about McLaren. And there was a lot for him to dig himself out from under with McLaren. So McLaren was sort of John Lydon's anti-muse during this time, and certainly a very effective one, just as he had been back with Submission. So yeah, and I mean, it's a sprawling 10-minute masterpiece that its length is perfect. It is the exact length I think it needs to be. I think it is the perfect opening statement. It's the perfect starting point of this incredible masterpiece, of this incredible musical journey, and so Lydon, and then at the end, kind of in an answer, I don't know how deliberate, to the terminal bottom at the end of theme, Lydon goes into a shrieking, high-pitched piss take of Roy Orbison's "Only the Lonely." Another, again, after taking you through the depths of seriousness and the depths of despair and the depths of self-doubt and self-questioning, then throwing in a mocking, self-deprecating joke. Now, there are a couple versions of Albatross that are out there. There are the monitor mixes that first would have appeared on the DVD version, with the DVD disc of this release. They are also on. They are included here on the rare and unreleased mixes on disc 3 of the reissue, and Albatross is on the monitor mixes on Songs from the Heart. There's also something known as, because I don't have the DVD version of this, there is also something known as the Melodrama mix, which is basically almost like a dub reggae remix that features Wobble's vocals over the top, and the band kind of shunted in the background, and presumably Wobble playing melodica. So I'll be honest, that has only been released there, and I'll be honest, I don't particularly think all that much of it. So I can link to that. It's on the Flowers of Romance channel, the YouTube channel, that has some really, really cool stuff on it. And famously, in one of his final interviews, Keith Levine apparently had contacted them, asking them to take certain things down, because I don't know how they had access to what they had access to, but they had access to things that Keith did not want out there. So I always thought that was interesting. So then, because this is being played at 45 RPMs, we flip the record over. So we flip the record over, and we get to side 2, and the first song is Memories, and Richard Dudansky is now on drums. One thing I did forget to mention is I wholly forgot to mention. So I mentioned the monitor mix of Albatross. It's not particularly different than what's on the album. It's just more of a straight. It's just as the band played it live in the room in the moment. So it's certainly worth hearing. I think it's really interesting. I think if they had edited it down, and not done some of the sort of channel separation stuff, or the channel separation stuff wasn't done as skillfully, maybe the monitor mix could be the definitive version, but I think what's on the album is basically perfect. This is just an interesting alternate view. But like I said, if they had cut it down to like 4 minutes or something, then you would want like the big 10-minute version. So I figured I should mention that. So anyway, so we get into Memories, which was the second single from this. And again, here we are. This sounds amazing, though the vinyl is it is a wobbler, but the sound is absolutely fucking incredible and like super hot, as kind of all pill recordings were at this time. So anyway, Memories is, and so there are the two versions. There's this 12-inch version single, and then there is what is on the album. And, excuse me, I will say that the 12-inch version single is more sort of ambient and more highlights the kind of free-flowing nature of Keith's guitar and the sort of the sheer unconventional beauty of the guitar playing. That being said, if I had to choose, I probably would prefer what is actually on the album. Now, what is actually on the album is pretty remarkable, and I've talked. Lester Bangs made a big deal out of it in his review. I've talked before about auteurness, and I think the auteurness of the mix is one of the most amazing moments on this album. There is tape splicing. I feel like this is sort of the missing link between what Arthur Lee kind of started doing on Forever Changes, and then what Lou Reed really took and did with the third Velvet Underground album in terms of the closet mixes, and then what got pushed even further with John Spencer and Pussy Galore in the 80s, and then into Yamatsuka Ai and what he did with the Boredoms. I think that the idea of taking a live band and then sort of painting over that, basically, I mean, this is one of the most... This is kind of one of the most auteur things I think that you can do, and absolutely incredible. There's a splicing or toggling in between different mixes. I don't think it's an alternate recording, because some of the vocal isms of Lydon are exactly the same, unless I'm missing something. But what it highlights in the song, because lyrically it is a true, it is a true testament to being an overthinker and what I guess they call ruminative thoughts. Only somebody who sits up in a depressive spell watching television endlessly could, I think, would even think to write something like this. And it features one of John Lydon's greatest lyrics: "Your words are useless, full of excuses, false confidence. Someone has used you well." Doesn't get much better than that. That is pretty phenomenal writing. So adroit, so perfect, so succinct, yet, says it all. And again, we have another absolutely glorious, endlessly sonorous, perfectly realized bass line by Wobble. And Dadansky is perfect on this. I mean, this is one of Richard Dadansky's greatest performances. His drumming on this is absolutely spectacular, and I love what he does on this. And then you have, so one of the themes that gets kind of established here is the phenomenon of Levine sort of playing with themes and near quotations and recontextualizations of quotations. And I think that he does it really interestingly and skillfully. So this song was originally known as The Spanish Job. And playing the sort of standard, what you would sort of think of as like a flamenco lick. But Levine just takes that and extends it out in a million different directions. And again, I mean, this is another one of his symphonies, and it's the next development past what he was doing on the first album. I mean, again, this really is like a jazz player figuring out endless variations, and Lydon's voice being, again, used as an instrument. As great as the lyrics are, you can just purely appreciate what he's doing vocally and the notes that he's hitting, and the frequency and harmonic interplay between his voice and Levine. And I'm gonna go so far as to say is this is the they wouldn't want it to be called rock music, but the pop, we'll say pop equivalent of Miles and Coltrane. I mean, just two absolute giants soaring in and around each other in perfect kind of symmetry, as ragged and unconventional as it is. And to have that over the top of Dadansky playing for his life, and Wobble, like the ultimate, like, I mean, Wobble just makes it look so effortless, and it is so fully realized and so perfect and so indelible. I mean, to me, I can't just say that it's Wobble's album, as great as it is, and as much as you could solely focus on him. Because you then have all of these other things happening on top of it, and layers, the true layers of what you're hearing. Absolutely phenomenal. And the splicing on the album version is, to me, further enhances the depth of the song, because it is the memories coming back, and it is you can claim, or you can declare, right, this person's had enough of useless memories, but you only declare it if you've been kept awake by them, and if the B-side is, I'm going to talk about a little bit later. The B-side is called Another. It is Graveyard with vocals. But this single, the sound of it is the way this looks. It is this battered, odd, coming at odd angles, making the black and white seem like color. Levine talked in interviews about that, about the act of staring at a blank wall and seeing colors and patterns emerge. It's something I think we can all relate to. The brain fills things in. I've certainly experienced that hundreds and hundreds of times in my life, and the walls in here are all white for that reason. Had it painted white when we moved in, and it's something I completely understood when I heard Levine talk about that, and it just makes a ton of sense to me, and it sounds like this. And I'll get into Another a little bit later, but Memories is another like staggering masterpiece. Excuse me. And then we get into, good Lord help us, we get into Swan Lake slash Death Disco. It had already been released as a single. As I said, I don't have that single. There are many versions of this. So there was the 7-inch edit and the 12-inch edit. Half-inch, half-mix, mega-mix are, it appears to just be the same recording. That is the re-recorded Fodder Stomp. It's really cool. I don't know. I would assume it's Levine on synthesizer. Given that the Socialist later on the album is sort of dueling synthesizers between Levine and Wobble, it sounds very similar. So it very could be Wobble and Levine colliding over each other. It's a fascinating, really great track. A really, really cool, evocative instrumental piece that totally transcends its origins as the knees up ending of the first album, and then it just comes to a dead stop. It's really it's it's a commanding recording and an interesting addition to this period. The 7-inch mix of Death Disco is what I would have heard on Greatest Hits so far. I'm fairly certain that's the one they used. Then there is the 12-inch mix. The differences are dramatic. The 7-inch mix is coming in around 4 minutes and is extremely bass heavy and extremely kind of tightly focused and mixed. It's the same take on the 12-inch, except it's nearly 7 minutes. The bass and drums are way de-emphasized, and the guitars and Lydon are way pushed up. I definitely prefer the 7-inch to the 12-inch, even though the 12-inch you get to hear all of the unbelievable intricacies of what Levine is doing, and is, totally amazing to hear just from that. There is the 10-minute monitor mix, and some people think that the 10-minute monitor mix, which again is just them live as they played it in the room, there are people who think that that is the definitive version, the ultimate version, just the pure 10 minutes. For reference, what you hear on the 7-inch mix, where Lydon is screaming "words are useless," that marks roughly the halfway point of the full monitor mix. I actually find the full monitor mix, I'll be honest, to be a little bit a case of too much of a good thing. I think it's a little bit like listening to some of the versions of Bob Dylan's It Seems Like a Freeze Out or Feels Like a Freeze Out, the early version of Visions of Johanna. Those are fascinating and really, really interesting, but there is the alchemy, the perfection, the otherworldliness of what's either on Blonde or what he's playing live on the 66 tour. The steps along the way are fascinating, but I find, for me as a listener, take away a little bit of the sheer awe of it. So again, some people prefer that, and if you love it, great. I don't want to take any of your enjoyment away, but that's sort of that's my opinion on this. On the rare and unreleased mixes on the reissue, there is also the master recording, which is sort of like a composite. The best I can figure is sort of something of like a composite mix of everything. And then we have what is actually on the album, and what is on the album to me is the greatest version. It's the most perfectly amalgamated version of what Wobble is doing and what Levine is doing. It's again shortened. It's about 4 minutes, and it is the ultimate concise statement. There are also what I would imagine are synthesizer overdubs, and again, I would admit these sort of pulsing chrome, what sound like synthesizer overdubs from Levine that are perfect and highlight and intensify, enhance the drama of it, the human suffering and agony being depicted, that is just playing out. David Humphrey is on drums. This is again the signature hi-hat of David Humphrey. This is recorded with Manor. This is one of the ultimate. This is like the ultimate Manor recording, and those photos. I feel like this is the ultimate. This is the sound of how the Manor looks. It's how part of me thinks all of England looks, which of course is not realistic whatsoever. But it's like the England of my imagination, and it's the England that's somehow still tied to like the Middle Ages, and the England of Canterbury Tales somehow. It sort of ties all of this together. We don't have a sense of that in America. We don't really live too much with the ancient and the modern jammed together. And we don't really see the modern collapse into being antiquated in such a way. In America, we just clear cut things out, and there's a lot of change for the sake of change for no fucking reason whatsoever. So the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, which you also kind of see in England, and the sort of patchwork quality that Lydon talks about in the architecture and the things being shifted over time and being built onto and adapted. We don't really have that in America, but that is rife from what I've been able to put together in English culture, and again in like architecture and things like that. And I find all of that endlessly fascinating. In America, we tend to have like the antiquated and then the modern and then like rural areas, and that's sort of it. And the antiquated tends to be just treated like it's the sticks and they're just mouth breathers, and they're behind, and get with it. And I culturally, I think that speaks to some of the vapidity and cultural bankruptcy that we sort of experience here. So yeah, and but at any rate, Death Disco is Swan Lake. Why Swan Lake? Another near quotation, Inside Out, to paraphrase Fodder Stomp, Inside Out Tchaikovsky, and so another strange, interpolation by Levine, extended out into all of these other fascinating areas, and his endless facility for playing off themes, and again, it just extending out and just being the fearless sonic explorer. But you have Wobble's bass line. I don't know. It might be the greatest. It's not even just the bass line. It's the riff. It's the melodic underpinning of the entire song. Kind of in the same way that Memories was, and some of the other songs on this album. It's one of the greatest riffs of all time. I mean, it's right up there. I mean, it's right up there with any of the other great riffs that you can think of. It's right up there with "I Want to Be Your Dog," or what's it? "Smoke on the Water," for that matter, or "Satisfaction," or "Jumpin' Jack Flash." I mean, it's as perfect of a riff as riffs get. It's absolutely like utterly indelible, and it stays with you forever. And it is so dark and so menacing, yet it moves, and it is also danceable. It truly is the death disco. Obviously, Lydon wrote it about his mother. I mentioned in the last video, pill video, that he sang it to her in the hospital. Caused a lot of consternation with his father. Lydon sings this. It's one of the greatest vocal performances of all time. Levine remembers Lydon singing it live in the studio, and just how passionately he was singing it. When I saw him perform it in 2010, he wept. He was wiping. He was crying. He was wiping away tears as he was singing it. I forget. I think had his father recently passed at that point, I want to say. So Lydon. Again. The songs from the heart, right, is like truly, if Wobble is the musical engine room of the band at this point, Lydon, and I talked about this in the album review, Lydon is the emotional engine room of Public Image Limited, and this is very, very, very real, and you are looking at Van Gogh's ear, to paraphrase Rene Ricard. It is a spectacular, perfect masterpiece. What else can you say about it? But again, I ultimately would go with the album version, and that sort of phased outro with like the quick cut, like not even long enough to be false endings. Really dramatic in the way that it just cuts to an ending. brilliant. It's brilliant record making, and the idea of sequencing Death Disco after Memories, that the memories just keep coming back. It's another, to me, it's brilliant album sequencing, and again, another kind of, I mean, this is another level of sophistication in terms of sound presentation, songwriting content, and then the sequencing of putting these things together. What else can you say? I mean, this is one of the greatest works of art of the 20th century, and this is why, that you can, and that you can have the subjective experience. I think, to me, it's also unlike some of the stretches of Pet Sounds or even Sgt. Pepper's or something, where there is a little bit of standing at a remove and admiring it more than subjectively experiencing it. At least I subjectively experience this, and I am in the extrasensory sound world with them as they are performing this music. And in the same way of my Endless Love of Black Flag, you are in the grips of this music with them, and it utterly commands your attention. So then we flip the record over. So one thing I want to mention as we get to side 3 is this Greatest Hits So Far, which again was my first thing that I got by Public Image Limited. Obviously, that was John Lydon, but I talked about this in the Black Flag video. Pre-internet, not knowing who people were in bands or what they looked like. So there was this picture of John Lydon, but and clearly I knew who that was. And then there was this, and I wasn't sure who this was, so I assumed that this must be Keith Levine. I didn't know. I had no idea that was John McKeoch. I was confused by the fact that there were only 3 photos. Bruce Smith was gone by this point. But then this person, Alan Diaz, I'll be completely honest with you, I knew that the bass player was named Jaw Wobble, and I just assumed that this was Jaw Wobble. I had no idea that it was a play on John Wardle. I had no idea that he was, a white British person. I had absolutely no idea. So for about a year or so, I thought that was what Jaw Wobble looked like. And it's pretty funny in retrospect. Again, pre-internet, you just didn't know, and you just kind of made assumptions and kept it moving. So anyway, so I just think that's funny. So anyway, we move into side 3, and it opens with Pop Tones, one of the last songs recorded. Keith Levine is on drums. This was recorded at the Manor. The engineer was Nick Cook. And there are 2 versions of this. There's what's on the album, and then there is what's known as Pop Tones version 3, which is on this. That is, I would assume it's all Keith. Is keyboard drenched and has all these, and maybe some melodica in there. It's hard to tell. It's a fascinating alternative. I want to say that it is the same take. I might be wrong about that. If I am, oh well. Fascinating alternative version, really interesting. I don't think it supplants what's on the album, but again, really, really, really interesting as sort of a route not taken. So Keith Levine plays drums on this, and as for all of his myriad musical talents, Keith wasn't really a drummer. So what he does instead is he plays interesting drum parts. It's more of a percussive part than it is a proper drum track. Wobble, however, comes in, and my goodness, Wobble plays. This is one of his busiest bass lines, but there is a even though it is busier, there is a fluidity and again a seamlessness to it that is absolutely stunning. And I will say, I know Joy Division were a going concern by this point, but this is like a Peter Hook. It's higher up. I want to say it's higher up on the neck. It again carries the melodic weight of the song, kind of like what Peter Hook would be doing, and yeah, it's Peter Hook level, and just as indelible, but fascinating because there's such a shape-shifting sense to it. It really does feel like it's like moving backwards. It's almost like a alternate reality version, or the opposite negative of Albatross in a way, which is always, I forgot to mention, like it's always interesting to me that Albatross opens with slow motion, with Lydon moaning slow motion, because there are moments on this album that Keith and I, this is a thing I had forgot to mention in the 78 video. Keith's idea with The Clash was that they were going to be the fastest band in the world. His idea with Pill was that they would be the slowest band in the world. So that didn't quite happen, thank goodness, to incredibly wonderful results. But Keith creates just this underwater bed of another beautifully weaving guitar line that is just absolutely gorgeous. And one of my favorite things that he does on the entire album. I forget which song on this, but I want to say that this might be the one that quotes a Yes song. And we know that Keith was a big Yes fan, so I want to say that this is the one that has a near quotation. I am, outside of a few things here and there, I am really unfamiliar with Yes. I do like a few songs, but I wouldn't know. And I certainly wouldn't get the sort of distended kind of alternate reality quotations that Keith does. So, and if he wouldn't have mentioned it, I wouldn't have even known it. And I might be wrong about that completely, but it is just a fascinating, again, weaving bed. It really does sound like underwater music. And to me, it kind of prefigures a little bit of what would happen soon with Talking Heads' Remain in Light. It kind of, where it's not so much arranged chords and strict rhythmic sections and delineated songwriting, and interesting, cool percussive parts that are then sort of treated. Wobble's ability to adapt to drummers, and there are little moments in what Keith is doing where it does feel a little like drums in space, and yet Wobble's ability to play over that and to fuse something and create something rhythmic and melodic at the same time. It's unbelievable. I mean, this is unbelievable virtuoso stuff that Wobble's doing. And then over the top of that, Jesus fucking Christ, you have John Lydon at the top of his game with one of the most musically adventurous and abstract songs. And again, 7.5 minutes. Lydon does his most sort of songwriterly, cogent, coherent, least angular, as opposed to some of the stuff like Memories and the next song, which again are angular and very clipped. This is, this is an incredible, again, story song, filled with brutally penetrating details, and it gets all of the details right. So it was based off of a true story. This is well-trod territory, but I'll recount it anyway. There was an article in the newspaper. So this is the next version of Annalisa. There was an article in the newspaper. Bodies, Annalisa, and Pop Tones sort of form sort of a unofficial trilogy in a way. It was a girl who was kidnapped, driven out to a forest. There apparently was a rape that occurred, and then I guess she was kind of left in the forest. The way that she was able to identify her abductors and attackers was by the sound of their voices, but also they were kept playing a tape that played Pop Tones. Lydon has never divulged what the song was that was playing, but because of she remembered this song that they just kept playing on the tape deck. She was able to describe the car, the voices, and this song. And apparently, when they apprehended the abductors stroke attackers, they found the cassette. The cassette was still in the tape deck, and I don't know if it was actually still playing the song or not when they literally got pulled over, or were discovered. But the tape was in the tape deck. So, it's another extremely humanistic, tragic. Lydon sings at first person, and I mean it's an absolutely incredible piece of writing. This is top level genius stuff. This is, again, like Death Disco, like everything that we've heard so far. I mean, this is just top level songwriting, top level lyric writing. He would hate this, but I mean, this is poetry as lyrics. It's modernist, angular poetry as lyrics. Stunning stuff. And you can just read the words and appreciate how amazingly written they are. So divorced of any tune or of any music. So, you have Lydon working on a multiplicity of levels, you have Wobble working on a multiplicity of levels, and you have Levine working on a multiplicity of levels. Incredible. I don't think that they could have made albums just with Levine as the percussionist / drummer. I don't know how far they would have gotten with just him in that role, but they function at a ridiculously high level just as a trio. So incredible. The next song, also done at the Manor, is Careering. And Careering I've already touched on a little bit. Careering is another masterpiece. I first would have heard it again on Greatest Hits So Far. It is apparently, the lyrics are another story song about a Northern Ireland terrorist careering as a businessman, a British businessman in London. It's a really interesting way of writing about that time and obliquely writing about the Troubles. Lydon is half Irish and sort of it was interestingly considered Irish by some of the press and McLaren, etc. Though Lydon considers himself British and doesn't really seem to consider himself London Irish. Part of it is when he would go to Ireland, they would consider him British. So it's a really interesting oblique way of writing about that. It's a fascinating angle as opposed to being super didactic about it or super obvious about it. So Wobble, this is, Pop Tones, Keith commandeered Careering, Wobble commandeered. He plays the drums amazingly, fucking great drums, and then does those beautiful percussive interruptions, which are another really important part of the song. If what Wobble is doing on Pop Tones is akin to Peter Hook, this would be akin, so one of the great bass players of the age. This goes all the way to a different part of the spectrum. This bass line would be akin to Bernard Edwards of Chic. I mean, this could be a Chic bass line. And another beautiful, perfect, fully realized, elegant bass line that also moves and is danceable. I mean, absolutely fucking incredible. So this brilliant rhythm track, and over that, fucking Keith Levine is doing, I guess this is all Prophet 5 stuff, and placing objects down onto the keyboard to keep drones going, different drones and tones, and then jumping on keys over that, and then layering himself. It's like some sort of ultimate soundtrack of Close Encounters of the Third Kind meets Poltergeist meets Blade Runner meets Liquid Sky. In a dream world, this could have been the soundtrack for any four of those. Again, this really is like music of the future, and music of the future that never happened. Absolutely fucking phenomenal, otherworldly stuff. And maybe Blade Runner is the closest analog. I don't know. What can you even say about it? It's a symphony. And the idea that what Wobble brought to Pop Tones, like, expands something that's already amazing into a whole nother realm. What Wobble's doing here is then expanded into a whole nother realm by Levine. And then again, god damn it, you've got fucking John Lydon with this incredible set of lyrics, this absolutely fascinating kind of in-time, out-of-time, oblique political / character study, like / investigation of the idea of identity itself, all again in clipped, angular, modernist poetry that mirrors what is happening with the percussion and bass, and mirrors what's happening with Levine and the synth explorations. I mean, this is fucking superhuman stuff. And in the same way that as an alternate to Pop Tones, which feels very open-ended and really like you are just sort of swimming in a riverbed, you're in water, but you can touch the floor of the river at the same time. This feels, like you are in a flying car going past rusted out buildings and like stainless steel faceless structures. Fucking amazing. The contrasts and the mental images that these things evoke. So one is all the way down, this one is all the way up. Brilliant, stunning, perfect stuff. And again, a testament to what Lydon can do as a lyricist, that he can be expansive in pop tones and perfectly reductive in careering, and yet the details are absolutely right, and the phrasing is perfect. And again, this is why they're Public Image Limited. This is why they command such attention from the people who love it. You know what I mean? This is why they're the fucking governors of post punk. You know what I mean? So then we flip the record over yet again. So we flip the record over, and we get No Birds, also known as No Birds Do Sing, also known as No Birds brackets Do Sing, recorded at the Townhouse with Richard Dudansky on drums, and premiered live with his first gig. This is one of the more interesting. As you follow the creation of this album, it's interesting. Levine's differences in style, the subtle differences, are really interesting. And there is a brief period of him sort of playing clusters out of melodies back into clusters that you hear a little bit of on Chant and also on this song. So that was a brief phase of his when Richard Dudansky joined, and it is so there's sort of a back and forth shattered chord pattern that then moves into an extremely evocative sort of note run that is one of my favorite things that he does on the entire fucking opus. Again, another perfect, amazing wobble bass line, maybe closer to something off the first album, but again with such fluidity and grace, and again carrying the melodic weight, or the melodic weight is somehow in between the I don't know, the mercury or melting glass of Levine and what Wobble's doing. Dadansky is fucking great on it because he drives the rhythm in such an interesting way that I don't think Dave Humphrey would have done, and I don't know that Martin Atkins would have asserted necessarily. I think that it's Dadansky takes the groove in a really interesting way, and I think this is maybe this is his best moment. I don't know. But then again, you have John fucking Lydon. The features a quote from the poem by Keats, La Belle Dame Sans Merci, or Dame Sans. I don't know if it's Dame or Dame Sans Merci. But I don't know that he actually quotes the poem. I think he just takes the title from a line of the poem. This is one of the songs that when I was 19 or 20, when I would have gotten second edition, I remember one day I just stood there. I listened to the album in its entirety. And I just stood there after it was done, and I just read all of the lyrics. I just remember having the album cover on the back of the couch, and standing there, and I read the entire thing in one go. And by the time I got to the lyrics of "No Birds Do Sing," I actually got really choked up. I was so deeply moved. Lydon's lyrics again are, kind of weirdly, sprawlingly imagistic, and kind of foreshadows some of what Polly Styrene did the next year on her solo album. And it's very brief. It's not a long set of lyrics, and yet it contains indelible images and has such a sense of, I guess, of world building. It's also it's also probably, as a melodic structure from him, the most unconventional. And then it's sung. There's all these effects on his voice, and at times he sounds like he's moving backwards, kind of similar to Pop Tones or Albatross. And it is so unusual and so weirdly evocative. And then to sort of bring it all together, Lydon plays this piano part that in a perfect world, the piano is sort of echoing, or a further extension of what Levine is doing when he abandons the chords and goes into the note runs. It's probably my single favorite moment on the entire album, and that ending where you can barely hear the piano, but it just opens everything up. It's these weird moments where all of a sudden the clouds part, because this is such a dark album and such an imposing album, and it's just such an odd moment when the clouds part, because he's painting this sort of utopian vision, but the top scrim, the opening scenes of Blue Velvet before you see the ear, right? But then what is so interesting about what happens musically with the piano coming in is it actually shows actual beauty, not a simulacrum of beauty, as presented by the lyrics. It's again, there's the sense of humanism. It's absolutely beautiful, and I wish there was more of it on that. I wish there was another mix of that, because there's so many different mixes of these songs. I wish there was a different mix of that, because my God, that's stunning. But maybe that's all you need. Maybe that is all you need, is just that little brief moment of light, that little brief respite from the darkness. And speaking of darkness, we're about to get motherfucking dark, because we go into Graveyard. So I don't know that it gets particularly darker than Graveyard necessarily. So we've got again Richard Dadansky on drums, and another kind of perfect Dadansky drum performance, locking in with Wobble. I'm gonna say that, so there is Another and there is Graveyard. Another is the B side of this, as I've already mentioned, and then there's Graveyard. Graveyard is simply the instrumental version of Another. Though the difference is Keith. It's the most brittle, cracked, kind of fucked, sharp edges, broken, not melted glass, broken glass, broken chipped china, guitar parts, and again, I mean, just such beautiful sound painting, and that's Graveyard, and it's magnificent. But I think one better is Another. Another was apparently issued on some CD reissues of The Flowers of Romance. I don't have any of those. But Another is, which they would play live a lot. The other thing I will say, so Dadansky's drumming is perfect. It's this weird flat sound that they have on the drums that just complements everything and gives a sense of finality to things. But contrasting that, this may be my single favorite wobble bass line on the entire thing. It may be. It's the bass line. I say that because, I mean, Death Disco, you can't, I mean, come on, it's Death Disco. But Another / Graveyard is the one I look forward to the most. It's the one I especially, and what Wobble's doing when I talk about elegance and simplicity and Mondrian, when Wobble does something what in any other player would be totally conventional and a totally like normal move, an octave jump, right? Wobble's octave jump feels like a fucking epiphany. It's like the greatest octave jump that ever was. It's again, there's so much fluidity to what he's doing and so much grace to what he's doing. Another, weirdly enough, given that it has a vocal on it, first of all, Lydon really sounds, I mean, this effect is carried into the next album, but Lydon really does sound like it's the 1880s and he's in a straitjacket on the top floor of a particularly abusive home for the mentally disturbed. I mean, the wailing from the attic sense of Graveyard, and he's maybe looking out at the graveyard. I mean, this is some dark Dickensian stuff, and again, so evocative and so, you know, the stories that, you know, that Joy Division tells that they didn't, you know, that I forget if it was Bernard Sumner, he didn't see a tree until he was 8 years old. That sense of England, the darkness and the dankness and parts of it that are so decrepit, you know, and ancientness and modern weirdly clashing against each other, being in time and out of time. Oh my God, all of that comes through in Lydon's vocal and Levine's weird broken guitar playing, and when he leans in on the E string, Jesus Christ, it's like every single note is perfect and hair raising and rising and falling tension and the mood is just so evocative and dark. If you've ever seen the cover of and now I'm forgetting the name of the Rudimentary Peni album, those drawings on the Rudimentary Peni albums, I feel like that's how fucking Another / Graveyard sounds, but especially Another. And it is this, like, if Death Disco is an amazing juxtaposition after Memories on the album, Another is / Graveyard, because I kind of consider it one piece, is an amazing juxtaposition after Memories. Because where do these people from the wedding photos go? Especially if it's meant to evoke something from the 1940s, they're by now they are in the graveyard. It is dark, creepy, ancient, eerie music. It is from another time, and it is corroded and oxidized. It is, it is that. So, yeah, it's ridiculously evocative, and again, virtuoso stuff, because I mean, this is again existing on some other level of creativity that how many people ever get anywhere near in their lives. So then we yet again flip the record over. So we get to side 5 of the epic metal box, and the first the 2 songs, and we have The Suit, another song, another one of the later songs. It is, I will say, interesting to put these songs in roughly chronological order, because as Pill was in and out of drummers, the more that they adapted to becoming a studio band and thinking more in terms of making backing tracks as opposed to the live band performances of the first album and the earlier parts of the makings of this album, and how quickly they adapted, how brilliantly they adapted, and yet it doesn't sound divergent. It adds extra dimensions and aspects to what you're hearing. So The Suit is basically commandeered by Wobble, an amazing otherworldly bass line, totally different than anything else he was doing, with, I guess, would that be 16th or 32nd notes? The maybe 16th, I'm not sure. An amazing out of nowhere bass line from Wobble, but apparently it was Wobble's also playing the drums brilliantly. A really great understated rhythm track with kind of overly loaded bass, so sort of raw power-esque in its odd approach to mixing, but then great little backwards snatches of music. Wobble is the one playing piano on this, brilliantly and beautifully. Again, perfect accents, absolutely magnificent. And then you have Lydon, another odd alien glimpse of suburbia, especially the home on the train, and you sort of can picture a train station in a slightly posh neighborhood, maybe the last train back into town, and like there's taxis waiting, but and there's like a few shops, maybe a newsstand open, like a candy shop open, and everything's scrubbed clean, and you're and it's unexpected because you don't normally exist in that milieu. Lydon makes that seem as alien as the atmosphere of Graveyard or Another, or the Forest of Pop Tones, or the Londoner of the mad businessman in Careering, on and on and on. He makes all of these equally in time, out of time, and as seemingly alien as you could imagine. And he sings it all the way at the bottom of his register. I don't know how it was mic'd, but it sounds like very, very closely mic'd. It is right in your face, and it is just a devastating, brutal character study. Keith Levine hated this song because apparently he liked the person that Lydon had wrote the song about, and then musically it was commandeered by Wobble. So Levine and Wobble, I don't know how much I've mentioned that, never really got on, never really saw eye to eye. They were two drastically different human beings in many, many ways, and not just for their extracurricular activities. And
temperamentally, I mean, you just see them in interviews. You watch Wobble on Check It Out, and whenever I do my Pill in 1980 video, look at Levine on the Tom Snyder Show. I mean, they are divergent human beings. So anyway,
Levine famously did not like this song, but no, it's a fucking masterpiece. It's as great as anything else. It's another brilliant, brilliant character study, but also just this, Leyden is just basically, I mean, this is just such a powerful portrait of England. I mean, it's just such an interesting, and it's, and in its ability to span time and make all these different connections. Absolutely stunning. I mean, such a great piece of writing, such a weird, creative approach to the vocal. I mean, again, this is why it's the masterpiece. And then the sort of, the way that Wobble sort of goes off on the piano and the fade out. And then anyway, then we get into the second song, fucking Bad Baby. Bad Baby is... was Leyden's nickname for Levine, and apparently Levine isn't on this. Leyden is credited with the keyboards on this, which I'll get to in a second. So first of all, I already told the story. This is the lone track that Martin Atkins is on, and god damn it, Martin Atkins fucking tears it up. Martin Atkins, this is one of the best drum performances on the whole thing with respect to Richard Dudansky and David Humphrey. This is outstanding. And they were lucky to have kept him, because Martin Atkins, amazing. And then another, I mean, Jesus Christ, how does he do it? Wobble, another perfect bass line, another melodic bass line. And again, clean and elegant and perfect. And this has that live bandness, which, think about how insane that is. It's the bass player with a drummer he's never played with, one take on the day. And it feels like the band. It feels like the whole band. It's incredible, right? And then you have the synths, these creepy, if that is Leyden on the synths, and then not Levine. So I always assumed it was Levine. And I always thought this was an ultimate example, like an arch example of Levine's genius. If that's Leyden, well, my God, then his musical contributions are just as important as his vocal and lyrical contributions, because those counterpoints, the counterpoint melodic stuff, that horror movie creepy as fuck synth stuff that he does, is as melodic as the bass. It's more melodic than what he does on a number of other songs. Fucking outstanding. Oh my God, it's the best synth on the whole fucking record, partially because there's the space for it, and it just comes out of nowhere, and it is like a fright scare, like a jump scare in a movie. Fucking brilliant. And then the suit, he's all the way at the bottom of the register, now he's all the way up at the top of his register. A great vocal melody, needling, again, weird and scary and strange and otherworldly, matching the tone of the lyrics. And then whoever was on the mixing board, maybe that would have been Levine, the crossing of and in or out, in and out of the multi-tracking of John's voice. Holy crap. That's another sort of level of white knuckle terror, what is happening on this song that has so much atmosphere, and yet it is, and I'll get to this in the next video, is it the single most compulsively danceable song on the entire record? Is it the one that has the most, for lack of a better word, funk and or disco to it? Because Wobble is moving fucking space and time around like it ain't nothing. I mean, this is Wobble's virtuoso. Is it ultimate virtuoso? I don't know, because I already said Another / Graveyard was my favorite bass line, and I already said that Death Disco is one of the greatest riffs of all time. I don't know, but this is another one. This is another, like, all-star, holy fuck, how did he come up with that in the moment kind of moves. But then again, Leyden, I mean, and that vocal melody, those lyrics, and then if that is him, then whoever the fuck it is, then those synths, and then whoever's decision to mix it in such a
weird head space time defying fucking way. I mean, my God. Again, this is virtuoso, brilliant, perfectly realized stuff with all the rough edges and even the way the sort of tape, I don't know if it is in fact the sound of that, but just the tape sort of running out at the end. Perfect. I mean, my God. Yeah, and so that's fucking Bad Baby. I mean, what can you even say about this, you know? Perfect. So then for the final time, we flipped the record over. All right, we are rounding the third disc and heading for home. Side 6 of the Behemoth begins with Socialist. Richard Dudansky on drums. This is kind of a cousin of Half Mix, Mega Mix, and it is apparently Wobble. Wobble, great, super simple but awesome bass line. Dudansky, another great, tightly controlled, mechanized sort of robo-drumming. You know, Dudansky, I hope I have given him the praise that he is due, because Dudansky did a phenomenal job on this album. But the band, you know, they kind of like Half Mix, Mega Mix. They sound like nothing else. They don't. You know, it's almost like they were briefly this other band for a very short period of time, and it's just such a cool atmospheric. Instrumental. Levine manipulated the cymbals so that they spiral up and out in a very kind of 1967 psychedelic fashion, but he would, I'm sure his reference point would have been dub reggae. Absolutely fucking great instrumental, and it's just really cool to hear them in such a boiled down, tight, concise way, with Levine and Wobble going at each other with the synth parts. So I always wondered if the title of Socialist was a little bit of a piss take. By the way, on the album, on this, Socialist, Chant, and Radio 4 are presented as one long medley. So I should just mention that. But Socialist is a really, really cool... So Wobble apparently considered himself a socialist. Lydon, I imagine, would have poked and prodded at that, because Lydon, and one of the things I love about Lydon is his refusal to sort of adopt ists or isms, and his sort of shredding of ists and isms is one of my favorite things about him. So Socialist, amazing. Again, would have been perfect in any of the movie soundtracks I sort of mentioned. It's just such a, again, bleak, kind of dystopian, but also the sort of Dickensian London pointing backwards to that too. Amazing stuff. Music of the future, music of the past, in time for all time, you know? So then we get into Chant, a song I've mentioned a lot, and a song I would be remiss if I did not mention. There are two versions of on the rare and unreleased mixes. There is what is known as, there's Unknown Instrumental Jam, which is just sort of the initial idea and the one sort of linking guitar part that Levine does. He plays briefly, and it's just it's a longer just jam piece with Dudansky, Wobble, and Levine kind of playing live. This was done at the Townhouse, but then even more interestingly is what is known as Mega Chant, which is Lydon's overdubs, but also I would imagine him on the synths, or given that it's the same synth sound as the alternate of pop tones, I wonder if that could also be Levine on this wash of synths. So that could have been released in and of itself, Mega Chant, because I fucking love it and is one of the most revelatory pieces of music on this. I adore it. This 2016 set, again, if you have, I don't know what the availability of it is, but if you have the money, snatch this up because it really, really is worth it, and it really takes you through. And kind of like the album reissue, it's the same outline. It's you get the booklet, you get all the information, and then you get the second edition era, or not era, but related photo cards. And then you get a gigantic pull-out poster, which I'm not going to pull out because, god damn it, this video is long enough. But Chant, is... So, first of all, to me, the definitive Chant is probably the appeal sessions. That's the when I think of Chant, that's the version that I think of. This, however, is amazing. Lydon is again mixed very weirdly. He sounds like a broken transistor radio waving in the wind. At times he sounds almost like Marianne Faithfull. Later Marianne, like broken English Marianne Faithfull. Amazing set of lyrics. The reason I said I wondered if the Socialist was a piss take of a title is just because Lydon's throwing out a mention in The Guardian, every librarian has his theory, which I could see every librarian has his theory being a Lydon-esque, swat at self-styled intellectuals who adapt pre-existing belief systems as a way of being intellectual bullies. We've all met a few of those, haven't we? So, and try to be imperious about it. So, Chant to me, the way that it is mixed, Levine's ultra-knotted guitar playing, and again, Dadansky playing for his fucking life. Justice for Richard Dadansky, playing his ass off. God bless him, like playing his ass off. He is the underappreciated member of Public Image Limited. So I hope that I have done him justice in this review, because he fucking well deserves it. Plays so awesome and locked in so tight with Wobble, and not afraid to go off and again watch the Check It Out performance, because you can see how fucking awesome he is. And I mean, he went on, like I said, he went on to play with some of my favorite stuff with the Raincoat. So, amazing. And so anyway, but it's the most intense, I think, sound painting on the entire thing, because it is the dingiest and most contemporary vision of the darkest, the parts of London that the tourists never see. I mean, this is, from what I understand back then, the Isle of Dogs would have been pretty rough. I don't really know I barely know American geography. Are you kidding? You think I know fucking geography of England in the 1970s? Are you joking? So anyway, but no, it's just like so spectacular. Again, someday I will talk about John Lydon's bus tour of London on the There Will Always Be an England DVD. It's one of the most fascinating things that he's ever done, and in it he talks about there's I don't know what the body of water is, but they're driving parallel to it, and he talks about how there would be drug dealers living out on makeshift barges that him and Sid would go get amphetamine sulfate from, and he paints a fascinating portrait of what London was like to live in at that time, and gets up near where Gunter Grove was. So it just, I feel like this, again, portraits of England in and out of time, all sort of blurring weirdly over each other. It's like the Metropolis version of the Kinks of the Village Green Preservation Society. It's that same weird in and out of time thing, and portraits of this country that isn't what it was, is going into some abstract future, a vision of what never may have even been. Fascinating stuff. Memory and fear of the future all colliding together in real time. amazing, brilliant stuff. And so this is, like I said, this is some of the most sophisticated sound painting, because which is funny because it's also the most primal. It's the closest thing to rock and roll. It's known as their punk song, but like nobody was playing guitar like Keith Levine. I mean, it's not, there's no power chords, you know, and but it just the dinginess and the true like. Just the dinginess and the sense of crime and danger and fear all at once, and the sort of ultimate explosion of it, and the failure of the intelligentsia to properly address these problems, you know. And Lydon talked about that in the Filth and the Fury documentary, how, you know, labor had throughout the 60s and 70s had promised so much and delivered so little, you know. And I'll talk more about that someday with the Sex Pistols, but the phenomenon of the garbage strikes, the phenomenon of television broadcasts randomly cutting out, and at the same time, what's the solution? What's the incoming? Fucking Thatcher, right? So was that the fucking answer? I think a lot of people would say absolutely not. So you have, you know, you have nowhere to run, and Chant is the fierce articulation of that. And so on Mega Chant has this wash of keyboards. What is so interesting, and you never would have known that, is the wash of keyboards that you hear at the end, which sounds like a radio dial turning, and what sounds like it's some sort of interruptive device, was actually part of the overdubs of this, which doesn't diminish the art. In fact, it enhances it, because what it means is they took that when they were doing the sequencing and hard cut it in to the very 2 seconds of radio switching dials on a radio, and then into the grand finale of this absolute fucking masterpiece, one of the greatest works of art, not just one of the greatest albums, the greatest works of art of the 20th century. My God. We go into fucking Radio 4, okay? So, Radio 4 on here, Radio 4, I talked before about Keith Levine wanting to bring in Ken Lockey. Radio 4 was originally recorded, Levine was just trying to come up with another kind of a la The Suit and a la Pop Tones. Levine was just trying to come up with another backing track that Pill could use. He was also hoping to incorporate Ken Lockey into the band. He had Ken Lockey on drums and Levine doing the synths. There is a 10-minute version on here of Radio 4, the Symphony Suite, of what sounds like the rough track, because there's obviously overdubs on it, but of Levine and Lockey playing together. Levine recorded the bass himself. He recorded sort of a wobble simulacrum, and he does a pretty goddamn good job, though. I don't think Wobble would have ever played that as a bass line, because it doesn't have the sleekness or danceability. There is more of an arch, thought-out melodicism and musicality to it that Wobble maybe wouldn't have brought. So it's an odd interpretation of what Wobble would be doing, but it does mimic the sound well enough. So the 10-minute version with Lockey plays kind of rudimentary drums, but it's just fascinating because it goes on for about 10 minutes, and it's just absolutely fucking fascinating to hear this thing. What Levine did was Levine took the drums out when it was obvious that it wasn't, Lydon didn't want Lockey involved at all, and Levine decided to purely turn it into an instrumental piece and completed the overdubs. He already had the Wobble-esque bass parts, and so the idea behind Radio 4 was that it was to be it was the radio station that didn't exist. So that was the concept of Radio 4. So as Levine noted, it wasn't until about 1985 that they had FM radio in England. And so Radio 4 is this imaginary radio station. And so after the ultimate gnarled present and future fear and acknowledgement of the horrors of the past and fucking Chant all clashing at each other, no pun intended. You then get this thing that Keith recorded all by himself on all the instruments. This Radio 4, an actually utopian glimpse of the future. Radio 4, the channel where something like Pill could exist, the channel where something like the Raincoats or Linton Kwesi Johnson could exist, or where the pop group could exist, or where Joy Division could exist. In Joy Division, again, Joy Division, the Raincoats, Lydon loved the Raincoats, Wobble liked the Raincoats, they were fans of Joy Division, they were fans of Linton Kwesi Johnson, but the idea that, when Lydon had said back when he was in the Sex Pistols, I want to see more groups like us, he didn't mean other rock bands or other punk bands. What he meant by that was he wanted to see the spirit of rebelliousness and flaunting of the rules. He wanted to see more of that. He wanted to break it open so that, it's not for nothing that he loved the Stooges and Bitches Brew and Captain Beefheart. He loved and Kate Bush, all of this different stuff, right? The idea was to break all of it open, to not, as he himself said, no uniforms, all uniforms, but you're not subjugated to what the uniform means. So either none or all, and you can make it up as you go along. The idea was to open up expression, and in that sense, this, to me, one of the reasons I link post-punk to psychedelia is that there is the sense of joy or fun, but there is the greater idea of openness and exploration and connection of ideas and cultures, and as George Clinton would have said in a different context, a statement of interdependence. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful ending, especially for an album as acidic and as at times staring into the face of depression or death, or and again dealing with the past, present, and future all at once. And part of also what's interesting, it's also interesting, I made a reference to Eddie Van Halen in the last video. It's also interesting that, like Levine, one of the other greatest guitar players of his generation, one of the most forward-thinking guitar players of his generation, was also obsessed with synthesizers the most. And obsessed with seeing what the possibilities of this were, and how they could make music and explore different tonalities and textures. Like, fucking, that's another interesting thing. And by the way, I'll see if I can find a photo. John Lydon liked Van Halen. So for anybody who, not that I haven't gotten any nasty comments about it, but every now and again, there are people who don't appreciate Van Halen. Lydon liked them. So, and later on in the 80s, Lydon apparently was a guest at some of David Lee Roth's LA parties. So, but there's a photo of Lydon from around this time with Alex and Eddie at some sort of industry thing. So if I can find that, I don't know if I can, I'll put it up. Otherwise, there'll just be my lovely face again. But yeah, I absolutely fucking love Radio 4, and the other thing I love about it is, so I have gone this entire time without mentioning the White Album once, and here we go, we'll trot it out at the end. This is, to me, the counterpart to Goodnight. Levine was a Beatles fan, Lydon famously is not, but I'm going with it. If Goodnight, so you have the sound collage of Revolution 9 going into the overly absurd, over-orchestrated, light classical, Boston Pops, Mantovani of Goodnight, and how that to me is the capper of what the Beatles were, and their ultimate move as album makers and musical thinkers, that you go from this mad sound collage into that, right? The idea that you go from the ultimate sort of dystopian dingy portrait of garbage 10 foot high and miners strikes and all of this and skinheads and the Troubles and all of these things, this now former empire on the brink, right? You go from that, and there's that sound of the radio switching, and then it goes into Radio 4, which you could view it the way I was just talking about it, or you could view it as totally disquieting, and you could view it two completely different ways, in the same way that you could view Good Night, which at its core is a beautiful, very earnest song as John Lennon wrote it, or you can view it as sort of like this ultimate remove from culture and from engagement, and hard embracing of a sense of sentimentality for a world that never really was. All of that. And the way that you can view that in completely different ways. You can also view Radio 4 the same way, and you can view Radio 4 as, if the end of Good Night is like an Orson Welles set piece, like The Lady from Shanghai, the ending of The Lady from Shanghai with the Hall of Mirrors, the shootout in the Hall of Mirrors, or the opening shots of Touch of Evil, or any number of things in Citizen Kane, or any of the labyrinthine shots in The Trial, probably his best film as far as I'm concerned. But it's organic, and it's all sort of in camera and done with sets. You can look at Radio 4, so any of those grand set pieces, you can look at Radio 4 as like a Kubrickian set piece, like the end of 2001 or something like that, where it's not organic. I mean, it is ultimately, but you get what I'm saying. And you can look at it as some sort of weird decade after response or counterpart, and you can view it two completely different ways. This thing works on a lot of levels. It is an amazing, dazzling, perfect work of art that, again, you subjectively experience. And speaking of subjective, as a listener, Jesus, you need something that is, I think that you really need something that is, what would the word be? That does feel sort of comforting, or does sort of play you out into back into the real world as you're done listening to the album. So at any rate, I think that's about it from here. I have exhausted myself. I don't think there's much more I can add. So, as we wrap things up here, I need to announce the winner of the 100 subscriber special contest, and you will win. This is now going to be yours, the sealed copy of the Fugs Don't Stop box set. It was I used the YouTube random comment picker, and it was a tight competition, and the winner is Come Fifth. So congratulations, Come Fifth. And this is now yours. So the way, and apologies, Edwin. I feel really bad. Edwin, I will make it up to you. We'll figure something out. God damn it, because I appreciated your comment greatly, of course. Oh, God damn it! I'll put a link to this. Jesus, I'm such a Yahoo. I totally forget these things. I was on Edwin's podcast. Edwin and his co-host Eric Jordan, RMCP, have a podcast called Rock All Over You Podcast, and I was on it to discuss Raw Power, and so I'll put a link to that. I cannot believe I meant to put up an announcement, and I just, that's what happens when you procrastinate. So at any rate, you'll check that out. That'll be one of the many links below. And but yeah, Edwin, I will make it up to you. But come. This is all yours. So I'm going to put up on the screen. I created, and you will see how bad I am at promoting myself, conversations like when I was a younger man entering the working world, and my dad would say, well, you gotta sell yourself. The conversations would go like this. My dad would say, well, you gotta sell yourself. And my response would be, what, like a fucking whore? And that would be the end of the conversation. He would get angry with me, and that would be that. So I'm just not good at it. I don't really network. I don't really do much of anything. So I created a really half-arsed Instagram account to promote my channel. I made one post on it and never told a soul that it existed. So I have one follower on it, and I don't know who the hell they are. I don't really know how they found me. And they don't. Maybe they are, but they don't seem like a music enthusiast. If you are, great. I don't know. I was just, at any rate, I will put my half-arsed non-promotional Instagram account, and I assume you have Instagram. DM me there, and we will arrange a way for me to get this to you, because it is yours now. As the great Michael Nesmith once saying, it cannot be a part of me, for now it's part of you. So yeah, and then I already have something picked out if there ever is a 500 subscriber special. So yeah, so maybe I need to start doing my Instagram more. If you'd like to come follow me there, I'll follow you back, and yeah, so that could be a thing. So I'm exhausted. Good Lord. Only the lonely. So yeah, so I'm gonna wrap this up. I will see you all next time with an exciting new video. I have no idea what the hell it's going to be. Probably going to, I'm either dividing this up or I'm going to take a few weeks off. I don't know. So anyway, thank you. Please like and comment and subscribe and all of the YouTube things. And I will be back, like I said, soon with an exciting new episode. Again, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!